Hey guys, tonight we're going back around 40,000 years, deep into the Upper Paleolithic period, a time when early humans were roaming the frozen landscapes of Ice Age Europe. Tonight, we'll explore the daily struggles of survival, the tiny but crucial inventions they made, and the brutal winters that would challenge every instinct they had for warmth and food. In just a few minutes, you'll see why surviving even a single winter was a remarkable feat of resilience and ingenuity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you just woke up 40,000 years ago. The world outside is not just cold, it is relentlessly unforgiving. Thick layers of snow blanket the ground, and the forests that once offered abundant resources now seem to retreat beneath the weight of ice. The wind cuts across the open plains, sharper than any blade you might have held, reminding you immediately that survival is not guaranteed. Every breath is a small calculation of risk, breathing in icy air while conserving warmth, moving silently so as not to attract the attention of predators, and always staying alert. Your shelter is a shallow cave carved by both human ingenuity and the erosive hands of time. Inside, the flickering glow of a small fire offers warmth, but it is fragile, dependent on the painstaking collection of dry wood and kindling. Fire is not just comfort, it is life itself. Without it, the cold could claim you in mere hours. You notice how early humans had to consider everything: how to insulate the cave floor with animal skins, how to maintain smoke flow so that the fire burned steadily without suffocating those nearby, and how to ration their warmth to survive through nights that stretched for long, bone-chilling hours. Food is a constant concern. Unlike the supermarkets you know today, your meals are uncertain and often meager. Hunters must track herds over frozen terrain, using rudimentary tools like flint-tipped spears and crude traps. Every step in the snow carries the risk of injury, frostbite, or wasting precious energy. The knowledge of animal behavior is crucial. Knowing where herds gather, understanding migration patterns, and predicting which animals will survive the winter. Every successful hunt requires patience, strategy, and a fair measure of luck. Failure can mean days without nourishment. You begin to understand the significance of tools, which at first glance may seem trivial: sharpened stones, bone needles, and simple scrapers. These objects are lifelines. A well-made spear can bring down a reindeer. A bone needle can mend torn animal hides into protective clothing. A scraper can prepare meat and skins for consumption and warmth. Each item, meticulously crafted and maintained, represents hours of careful thought, generations of trial and error, and the silent wisdom passed down from elder to younger. Social bonds are equally critical. You are not alone in this cave. Your survival depends on cooperation, sharing food, tending to the sick, defending the group from predators, and teaching the young how to use tools and interpret the frozen landscape. Conflict can be deadly, harmony a rare but essential commodity. The quietest members, often overlooked, may be the most valuable, their knowledge of plant gathering, tracking, or shelter maintenance making the difference between life and death. Yet, despite all these precautions, winter is relentless. Temperatures plunge far below what you can imagine in the comfort of modern life. Snowstorms arrive with little warning, and blizzards can trap the unwary for days. Ice forms on every surface, making movement perilous and threatening to destroy stored food supplies. Early humans had no central heating, no insulated houses, no insulated clothing beyond what could be fashioned from hides, fur, and sinew. They relied on intimate knowledge of their environment and a resilience that seems almost unimaginable today. But survival is not just about endurance, it is also about timing and adaptation. Early humans observed the patterns of nature with an acute attentiveness. They noticed which trees provided the driest wood, which plants remained edible beneath snow, and how the behaviors of animals could signal changes in weather. They learned to store food when possible, to keep embers alive overnight, and to rotate watch shifts to keep everyone alert. These routines, repetitive and mundane to us now, were in fact the backbone of life in this frozen world. As you lie near the fire, listening to the howling wind outside, you begin to notice the ingenuity hidden in small gestures. A carefully constructed snow wall shields the entrance from icy drafts. A series of holes dug near the cave's perimeter trap small game that would otherwise pass unnoticed. Even the positioning of the fire itself has been calculated to maximize warmth while minimizing smoke inhalation. Every action, no matter how simple it seems, has meaning, and every failure can be fatal. Sleep, when it comes, is never deep or fully restful. Early humans had to remain attuned to sounds. The snapping of a branch outside could indicate a predator. The shift of snow on the roof could signal danger. Dreams were likely fragmented, punctuated by survival instincts, and the ever-present chill that seeps through even the thickest layers of fur and hide. Yet, within this struggle, there is a rhythm, a pattern, a quiet discipline that sustains life through what seems like endless hardship. You start to appreciate how even the mundane acts of daily life, sharpening a spear, gathering firewood, boiling water, carry a weighty significance. Each task reinforces not just survival, but an intimate connection to the world around you. The cold, the wind, the snow, and the forest are all teachers in this harsh classroom of existence. You see now why only the most observant, patient, and adaptable humans could endure these winters and pass on their knowledge to the next generation. Yet questions linger in the quiet moments by the fire. How did they measure time and track the changing seasons without calendars? What rituals or habits helped them remain sane during endless cold nights? And perhaps most puzzling of all, how did early humans mentally prepare themselves to face a world where every day could end in death from frostbite, hunger, or predator? These questions hang in the air, unanswered, as the wind continues to moan outside the cave walls, whispering reminders of the relentless challenge of life during the Ice Age. The story of winter survival in the Upper Paleolithic is not one of dramatic battles or heroic conquests. It is a tale of quiet endurance, meticulous observation, and the small but essential acts that kept early humans alive in a world that was often indifferent to their existence. It is, in every sense, a story of human resilience at its most elemental, and yet it is also profoundly boring in its attention to detail. The scraping of hides, the constant tending of fire, the repetitive rituals of hunting and gathering. And perhaps that is exactly why it is worth remembering. Survival depended not on spectacle, but on the mastery of the mundane. As night deepens, you realize that even in the face of such extreme adversity, life continues. And yet, one thought remains unsettled. In a winter this harsh, with limited food, and the ever-present threat of predators, could you truly survive for long? Or would the cold, the hunger, and the monotony claim you before spring returned? When the first pale light of morning seeps into the cave, the frost that has crept along the edges of the entrance glimmers like tiny, unyielding crystals. You awaken with the lingering chill still pressed against your skin, the memory of last night's wind howling through the treetops fresh in your mind. The day ahead will demand your full attention. Survival is not a luxury. It is a continuous, careful orchestration of time, energy, and knowledge. The first priority is warmth. You reach for the fire, now reduced to a scattering of glowing embers, and feed it carefully, adding twigs, dried grasses, and the remnants of last night's logs. Each addition must be measured. Too much wood, and smoke becomes suffocating. Too little, and the fire may die, leaving you vulnerable to the icy grasp of the morning. You notice the way the smoke drifts toward the cave ceiling, a signal to adjust the airflow, to ensure heat spreads evenly without reducing oxygen. For early humans, these small adjustments were the difference between comfort and exposure. Food preparation is equally methodical. Yesterday's hunt provided small game, and now you must divide and process the catch. Meat must be scraped clean, fat and sinew separated, and everything carefully stored. Spoiled food is a mortal threat. You use sharp and flint tools to remove sinew from bones, noting the precision required to avoid wasting precious nutrition. Some meat is cooked over the fire, while other portions are wrapped in leaves or fur and hidden in snow pockets, where freezing temperatures preserve it for future days. The thoughtfulness embedded in each motion is remarkable. Every cut, every placement, every choice reflects accumulated knowledge and an instinct for survival. Your clothing, fashioned from animal hides, is another layer of life-saving ingenuity. You check seams reinforced with bone needles, making certain no drafts pierce the protective layer. Simple as it seems, clothing was an engineering marvel of the time. Each hide represents countless hours of effort, from hunting and skinning to tanning and sewing, and the skill required to create wearable insulation is a mark of the human capacity for problem-solving under duress. Wearing multiple layers, you feel a measure of safety, though the cold still penetrates through gaps and thin spots, reminding you that nothing is perfect in this world. Hunting for the day is a central concern, yet it requires patience, strategy, and detailed knowledge of the environment. You step out into the snow-covered forest, each footfall carefully measured to avoid unnecessary noise. Early humans tracked animals not just through footprints, but by reading subtle changes in terrain, broken branches, and disturbed snow. They noted the way animals feed, sleep, and move through frozen landscapes, building an intuitive understanding of behavior that might appear almost magical to the untrained observer. Success on the hunt means nourishment and the raw materials for clothing and tools. Failure can mean weakness, illness, or death. As you walk, the landscape reveals itself slowly, a mixture of stark beauty and lethal indifference. Snow-laden trees bend under the weight of ice, streams are partially frozen and treacherous, and distant cliffs hide predators like wolves and bears. Each element of the environment demands respect. Early humans developed an acute sense of caution and observation, a constant balance of curiosity and fear. They learned not only to track prey, but to anticipate danger, employing quiet strategies, silent communication, and careful coordination with other members of their group. You pause near a frozen stream, reflecting on the daily routines that support survival. Water must be gathered and melted. Drinking snow without treatment risks sickness. The cold itself is an enemy, stealing heat from the body with every exposure. Frostbite is an ever-present threat, and even minor injuries could become fatal if untreated. Simple techniques, such as wrapping limbs in furs or rotating tasks to prevent overexposure, were vital. Each act, repetitive yet essential, built a rhythm of survival that shaped both body and mind. Yet, survival is not purely physical. The psychological strain of endless cold, scarcity, and monotony weighs heavily. Early humans likely experienced a persistent anxiety, a subtle, constant awareness of mortality. But they adapted. Rituals, whether shared meals, communal fires, or storytelling, offered relief and a sense of order. Passing down knowledge became both practical and cultural. Children learned through observation and participation, while elders imparted guidance that had kept generations alive. Social cohesion, patience, and shared responsibility were as critical as fire or food. You find a patch of soft snow and set a trap for small game, like rabbits or birds. The mechanics are simply sharpened sticks arranged with bait, hidden beneath snow and branches. Yet, simplicity belies the sophistication of understanding animal behavior, patience, and precision timing. These small victories were monumental in a world where every calorie counted. The quiet moments of setting a trap, checking it, and finally retrieving the catch represent the subtle, but vital victories that made life sustainable, even during the harshest months. As the sun arcs low, casting long shadows across the ice, you begin to realize how the mundane becomes heroic. The act of mending a fur, of feeding a fire, of watching the tracks of an elk across the snow, each is a statement of resilience. You notice how early humans layered problem-solving upon problem-solving, shelter, warmth, food, clothing, vigilance, coordination, and observation all intertwined. Survival was an elaborate dance with the environment, a negotiation with a landscape that offered beauty but no mercy. Even leisure, as limited as it might seem, serves a purpose. When firelight flickers across the cave walls, early humans might have carved bone tools, decorated hides, or simply shared stories. These acts reinforce social bonds and mental resilience, offering moments of calm and focus amidst constant survival pressure. Observation of the mundane. How smoke travels, how a fur holds warmth, how snow behaves under different conditions, was as crucial as hunting or building. In these small attentions to detail, life continued, quietly defying the extreme odds stacked against it. Yet, despite all skill and knowledge, unpredictability remained. A sudden blizzard, a predator sneaking into camp, or the failure of a stored food supply could undo weeks of preparation. Each day held potential peril, and yet humans endured. You start to sense that survival was less about heroics and more about repetition, precision, and a calm acceptance of risk. Life, in these frozen plains, was measured in methodical attention to countless small details that modern minds might overlook. And as you prepare to return to the cave for nightfall, fire replenished, traps checked, and food stored, a lingering thought remains. How did these early humans mentally balance the constant threat of death with the need to live, to plan, and to care for one another? Could we, with our comforts and modern knowledge, replicate such steady perseverance without succumbing to despair? Or was their endurance something fundamentally human, cultivated in ways that only extreme necessity could produce? Night falls again over the frozen landscape. The cave is dimly lit by the fire you carefully nurtured, the warmth carrying a fragile sense of safety. You reflect on the day's labors hunting, gathering, tending the fire, mending clothing, and observing the frozen world beyond. Each action, repeated day after day, formed a subtle rhythm of life, one dictated not by desire but by necessity. In this quiet, you can sense the culmination of countless generations, wisdom distilled into routines that appear mundane yet are profoundly strategic. The successes of survival are often invisible in a glance. A fire that continues to burn, a patch of food preserved against spoilage, a trap yielding a small rabbit. These are the markers of triumph. Early humans lived in a delicate balance, where endurance itself was the victory. Unlike modern feats of heroism or conquest, here the remarkable lies in persistence, patience, and the ability to observe minute details and adjust behavior accordingly. The world outside remains indifferent, but human resilience asserts itself quietly, daily, through these repeated acts. As the night deepens, your group huddles near the fire. Social cohesion, more vital than ever, manifests in small gestures. Elders advise on proper fire tending, hunters recount what they observed in the forest. Children mimic the motions of mending, tracking, or preparing food. These interactions, seemingly simple, transmit essential survival knowledge. The communal structure allows the group to mitigate individual weakness. A hunter falls ill, and another assumes the responsibility of tracking. A fire smolders dangerously, and several work together to reignite it. Each human life is interdependent on the vigilance, skill, and empathy of others. The psychological burden of winter is not to be underestimated. Endless cold and scarcity can wear down even the most resilient mind. Early humans likely relied on rituals, repetition, and structure to maintain mental equilibrium. The fire itself is a symbol of continuity, a center around which social life revolves, and a tool for preserving mental health. Storytelling, song, and careful observation of the natural world are not merely entertainment. They reinforce patterns, encode knowledge, and provide reassurance in a world governed by unpredictability. The mundane becomes profound, the repetitive acts of life forming a scaffold for survival and mental stability. Predators are a constant threat. Wolves and bears, adapted to the same harsh climate, shadow the human's movements. Every trip outside carries risk, yet also the potential reward of sustenance. The group's survival depends on cautious vigilance, silent communication, and acute awareness of animal behavior. An early human had to interpret subtle cues in snow patterns, tree branches, or animal tracks to avoid danger. The cumulative knowledge of generations informed each decision, demonstrating a sophistication of observation and adaptation that modern humans might underestimate. The cold also shapes movement and daily tasks. Simple actions, walking, digging, carrying food, demand more energy in the frozen environment. Fatigue is relentless, and minor miscalculations can result in frostbite, exhaustion, or accidental injury. Early humans mitigated this through meticulous planning, rotating tasks, layering clothing, and rationing energy. Even seemingly trivial activities, like gathering firewood or setting traps, are optimized through careful observation and trial and error learning. Each efficiency contributes directly to survival. Yet, perhaps the most remarkable aspect of human endurance is adaptability. When the wind drives snow into the cave entrance, they dig trenches and create barriers. When food runs low, they shift hunting strategies or forage for hidden winter plants. When a fire dwindles, they rely on preserved embers or shared knowledge of spark making. These adaptations are neither dramatic nor heroic in a cinematic sense, but they are life-saving. Survival in the Ice Age was a constant negotiation with an environment that offered no mercy but allowed ingenuity to flourish. As hours pass, a quiet reflection emerges: the mundane repetition, the meticulous attention to detail, the constant vigilance. These are the true triumphs. Modern society often overlooks such achievements because survival is assumed, comfort is expected, and daily effort rarely equates to life or death. But in the Upper Paleolithic, life was measured in the accumulation of small, careful decisions that ensured warmth, nourishment, and continued existence. You lie near the fire, pondering the resilience required to endure winter after winter. It is not bravery in the dramatic sense that defines these humans, but patience, observation, cooperation, and persistence. Every carefully scraped hide, every flint sharpened spear, every night spent awake listening to the wind and predators, becomes part of a legacy of survival. In their hands, the boring details of life, tasks we might dismiss today, hold profound significance. The survival of a group through a brutal winter was a testament to human intelligence, diligence, and adaptability, and yet, the lingering question remains: in such relentless conditions, how many succumbed despite all knowledge and preparation? What stories of perseverance were lost to the ice, leaving only fragments of evidence for us to interpret today? And more personally, when we consider the comforts of modern life, can we truly grasp the mental fortitude and quiet heroism that define those who endured these frozen worlds? The story of winter survival in the Ice Age is not one of spectacle, but of the extraordinary in the ordinary. It demonstrates that human ingenuity, patience, and cooperation can overcome environments that seem utterly hostile by focusing on what might appear boring. The repeated tasks, the careful planning, the small acts of observation and adjustment, we uncover the profound resilience that allowed early humans not merely to exist, but to thrive against the odds. In the end, the fire flickers low, casting shadows on the cave walls. The cold presses against the entrance, reminding you of the world outside, relentless and vast, and you realize that surviving in these brutal winters was never about grand gestures, but about the quiet mastery of small, essential details, an enduring testament to human endurance, one snow-laden day at a time. Children in the Upper Paleolithic did not experience childhood as we understand it today. From the moment they could walk, every movement, every action, was a lesson in survival. Life was a continuous instruction in observation, imitation, and repetition. They watched their elders constantly, noting the subtleties of tool use, tracking, fire tending, and food preparation. Play and work were intertwined. Even seemingly simple games were often simulations of hunting, climbing, or foraging. The earliest lessons often began with fire. Children observed its management with quiet attention, learning how to add twigs without smothering flames, how to fan embers, and how to protect the fire from wind or moisture. Understanding fire was critical. It provided warmth, cooked food, and kept predators at bay. Even a small lapse in attention could result in disaster, and so children quickly learned both respect and technique. Hunting instruction was gradual but persistent. Young ones shadowed hunters on the edge of forests or plains, mimicking tracking behaviors. They learned to recognize footprints in snow or mud, interpret broken branches, and distinguish the subtle differences in animal calls. Precision and patience were cultivated over years, as mistakes could cost both life and sustenance. Children often started with small, low-risk prey, birds, rabbits, or insects, before progressing to larger animals once they developed skill, observation, and confidence. Gathering skills were equally critical. Children learned which plants were edible, which could be used for medicinal purposes, and which were poisonous. They memorized seasonal cycles, noting when certain fruits, roots, or nuts were available. They discovered safe water sources, recognized signs of contamination, and learned techniques for preserving food in freezing temperatures. These lessons were reinforced daily, embedded into routine, rather than formal instruction. Knowledge was acquired through doing, repeating, and observing, creating a practical education of necessity. Tool making was a fundamental part of early childhood education. Children watched elders chip flint into points, fashion bone needles, or sharpen sticks for hunting. They practiced carefully, often with guidance, learning patience and dexterity. These skills were not simply crafts, they were directly tied to survival. A poorly fashioned spear or knife could be useless or even dangerous. Over time, repetition honed both hand-eye coordination and understanding of materials, forming the foundation of essential practical intelligence. Social learning was central to early life. Children observed not only tasks but also cooperation, conflict resolution, and hierarchy within the group. They learned how to share food, assist injured elders, or comfort distressed peers. Emotional intelligence, while subtle, was vital. A child unable to integrate socially might be excluded from group activities, reducing their chances of survival. Games often mimicked adult roles, teaching negotiation, patience, and attentiveness while fostering resilience in a harsh environment. Children also faced dangers daily, which shaped their education. Snow-covered terrain hid hazards, predators could approach silently, hypothermia and frostbite were constant threats. The young learned caution instinctively, developing alertness and situational awareness through repetition and experience. Observation of the environment became second nature, tracking changes in weather, ice thickness, or animal behavior. Early humans' survival knowledge was thus deeply embedded into daily practice from the youngest ages. The mental and physical training was continuous. Even sleep was brief and light, often shared with siblings or other children near adults to maintain warmth and security. Rest was functional, allowing for recovery but not indulgence. The cold, scarcity, and unpredictability of daily life demanded constant adaptation, fostering resilience and independence in ways modern childhood rarely requires. In essence, Ice Age childhood was an extended apprenticeship in survival. Play, observation, imitation, and participation all formed the curriculum. Every action, from gathering firewood to mimicking hunting motions, contributed to lifelong skills. Mistakes were dangerous but instructive. Success reinforced knowledge, confidence, and competence. By the time early humans reached adolescence, they were often fully capable of performing essential tasks alone, prepared to navigate the brutal winters and complex social dynamics that defined their world. And yet, questions linger. How did children mentally cope with the constant threat of death? How did early humans transmit subtle skills across generations without formal instruction? Could the observation, imitation, and repetition of early childhood truly produce a mastery of survival? Or were many lives lost before such lessons could take effect? As children grew, their lessons became increasingly complex. Beyond basic survival skills, they learned to anticipate the environment and understand cause and effect in the natural world. Tracking prey was no longer just about following footprints. It required interpreting subtle patterns, the slight bending of grass under the weight of an animal, the displacement of snow, the marks of claws on bark. Observation sharpened the mind, teaching patience, attention to detail, and the consequences of even small errors. Hunting practice evolved as well. Adolescents began carrying spears, carefully testing their throws under the watchful eyes of adults. They learned to coordinate with companions, timing movements to avoid startling prey, and reading signals from the environment to determine when an animal might appear. These exercises were not games. Mistakes could mean injury or the loss of a crucial meal. Yet repetition instilled muscle memory and judgment. By performing these acts repeatedly, children internalized survival strategies that would carry them through adult life. Fire management advanced alongside hunting. Older children took responsibility for maintaining embers overnight or preparing kindling for the morning. They learned how different types of wood burned at varying rates, how moisture affected flame, and how smoke could signal wind changes or predator approach. Mastery of fire required meticulous attention. A careless ember could ignite a cave, destroy food stores, or leave the group vulnerable. Children's small but consistent contributions to firekeeping became a foundation for trust and social integration. Food gathering was no longer limited to simple observation. Adolescents identified plants that required processing to be edible, collected berries hidden beneath snow, and learned which roots provided essential calories and nutrients during harsh winters. They stored caches of food carefully, wrapping perishable items in leaves or insulating them with animal fur. These practices reflected foresight, planning, and knowledge of the environment, illustrating how early humans converted boring tasks into a complex survival strategy. The social dimension of learning expanded as well. Children observed not only task execution, but also conflict resolution, leadership, and cooperation. Group survival depended on coordination, passing on knowledge, sharing resources, and assigning responsibilities appropriately. Adolescents learned when to speak and when to remain silent, how to support weaker members, and when to follow or lead. These social lessons were as vital as technical skills. A misstep in group dynamics could compromise safety, food security, or cohesion. Training also encompassed emergency response. Children learned to recognize early signs of hypothermia, frostbite, or injury and were taught immediate remedies, wrapping limbs, warming with body heat, or administering basic plant-based treatments. They understood which weather conditions were safe for travel and which required staying sheltered. Even minor skills, repeated daily, could prevent death or serious injury. Each successful application reinforced practical knowledge and built confidence, allowing children to participate meaningfully in group survival. As their abilities grew, children became participants rather than observers. They assisted with hunting, set small traps, and contributed to preparing shelters against snow and wind. These responsibilities fostered independence and practical competence. Mistakes remained instructive. Perhaps a trap fails or a fire smolders, but the learning embedded resilience and critical thinking. Early humans understood that survival depended not on instinct alone, but on consistent, disciplined practice, starting from the youngest ages. Mentally, children cultivated patience and observation. They became attuned to subtle environmental cues, changes in wind direction, animal behavior, ice patterns, or cloud formations that indicated impending storms. They developed a keen awareness of time and seasonality, critical for preparing for winter months. This continuous engagement with the natural world nurtured both intellect and survival instincts, creating a foundation for adult decision-making in a harsh and unpredictable environment. Play and storytelling remained central, serving both educational and psychological purposes. Mimicking adult tasks through games allowed children to experiment safely with problem solving. Storytelling reinforced memory and transmitted knowledge about successful hunting strategies, dangerous locations, or seasonal behaviors of animals. Rituals, whether small ceremonies, songs, or communal gatherings, help children understand social structure, cultural norms, and the continuity of group knowledge. These practices nurtured mental resilience, ensuring that children were emotionally prepared for the trials of survival. Despite these lessons, winter remained unforgiving. Children observed firsthand the consequences of failure, frostbitten limbs, failed hunts, or the slow weakening caused by hunger. Such experiences, while harsh, reinforced practical knowledge and careful attention to risk. Over time, children internalized survival strategies, developing skills that appeared almost instinctive. Observation, repetition, and participation were the invisible threads that tied childhood experience directly to life or death outcomes. By late adolescence, these young humans were highly capable. They could track, hunt, gather, build shelters, maintain fire, treat minor injuries, and navigate social dynamics, all under extreme environmental pressure. Survival was not a matter of luck, but the product of years of disciplined, mundane practice. Every repeated task, no matter how unremarkable it seemed, accumulated into an extraordinary body of knowledge. The boring rhythms of daily life, from collecting twigs to setting traps, were essential training grounds that ensured the continuation of life in a world dominated by cold, scarcity, and predation. And yet questions remain. How many children failed to acquire these essential skills and did not survive to adulthood? How did early humans balance teaching, protection, and exposure to risk? Could modern humans, with our luxuries and safety nets, truly replicate the discipline and attentiveness demanded of children in such a harsh environment? These reflections hint at the extraordinary endurance embedded in the ordinary. By late adolescence, young humans were no longer simply learners. They were full participants in the relentless rhythms of survival. What had begun as observation and mimicry had matured into competence and intuition. They could track elusive prey across frozen plains, interpret the faintest disturbance in snow, and act decisively when danger loomed. Their hands were skilled in tool making, their minds attuned to patterns of nature, understanding subtle changes in wind, ice, and animal behavior. Fire remained central to life. By now, adolescents often managed the hearth independently, feeding embers carefully, protecting flames from wind and snow, and ensuring the group never faced exposure. The glow of the fire became both a literal and symbolic anchor, comfort in the cold, focus for social gatherings, and a center for knowledge transfer. Maintaining it required attention to detail, awareness of environmental conditions, and collaboration. Fire mastery was both practical and a marker of growing responsibility. Hunting and gathering had also become sophisticated practices. Teenagers could plan small hunting excursions, coordinate with companions, and utilize learned techniques to maximize success. They knew when to pursue small prey and when to retreat, how to store food safely, and which resources were renewable or scarce. Each decision balanced risk and reward, reflecting an advanced understanding of survival that only years of careful instruction could produce. The social dimension was equally significant. Adolescents took on roles in mentoring younger children, reinforcing skills through demonstration, correction, and guidance. They participated in group decision-making, negotiated responsibilities, and developed leadership qualities essential for collective survival. Emotional resilience was cultivated through shared challenges, managing disappointment, dealing with scarcity, and navigating interpersonal conflicts. Social intelligence, often overlooked in discussions of prehistoric life, was crucial for maintaining group cohesion under extreme stress. Every skill acquired carried immediate consequences. Frostbite, starvation, or predation remained real threats, reinforcing the importance of precision and attention to detail. The mundane tasks of life, scraping hides, maintaining tools, monitoring food stores, were directly linked to survival outcomes. Adolescents understood this instinctively, internalizing the importance of discipline, repetition, and observation. The ordinary became extraordinary, each small act a building block in the architecture of endurance. Psychologically, Ice Age children had developed acute situational awareness and resilience. They experienced fear, frustration, and loss but were continually reinforced by success and survival. The constant engagement with environmental cues, repetitive practice, and guided instruction cultivated both confidence and a deep respect for the natural world. They learned that mastery of the small details, the boring work of life, was as critical as strength or speed in determining survival. By early adulthood, these young humans were fully capable contributors to the group. They could construct shelters, hunt efficiently, maintain fires, treat injuries, and navigate the dangerous landscape. The accumulated knowledge from childhood practice had become second nature, forming the foundation for independent survival and the continuation of human knowledge. They embodied a legacy of observation, patience, and adaptability, traits honed over countless generations. Yet the question lingers: how many children never reached this level of competence? How many succumbed to the harsh winters before fully internalizing survival skills? And what does this tell us about the extraordinary capacity of humans to learn, adapt, and persevere in even the most unforgiving environments? The Ice Age teaches us that survival was not just a matter of physical strength, but of quiet intelligence, patience, and the relentless pursuit of skill, qualities cultivated from the earliest days of life. Looking back, the childhood of early humans offers a profound lesson. The mundane rhythms of daily survival, observation, imitation, repetition, and cautious experimentation, were the true vehicles of endurance. Life in the Ice Age was grueling, yet the careful instruction and persistent effort of childhood prepared individuals to navigate danger, scarcity, and unpredictability. The ordinary acts of daily learning, often unnoticed and repetitive, created a foundation upon which all survival rested. In this light, childhood in the Ice Age was less about innocence and play as we know it, and more about disciplined apprenticeship in the art of living. Each small lesson, each repeated motion, each observation embedded in memory ensured the survival of both individuals and communities. It reminds us that extraordinary resilience often arises not from dramatic feats, but from persistent attention to the ordinary details that life demands. As the fire dims and the wind howls outside the cave, it becomes clear that early humans, through patience, observation, and repetitive practice from a very young age, crafted a continuity of life that could endure even the harshest winters. Their quiet mastery of survival, learned in childhood, represents one of the most profound legacies of human endurance, offering insight into the enduring power of discipline, learning, and adaptation across generations. Fire was the lifeline of early humans. Without it, survival in the Ice Age was nearly impossible, and daily existence hinged on its careful maintenance. The first flickering flames offered not just warmth, but protection, a way to cook food, and a beacon in the dark expanse of frozen landscapes. Early humans learned to respect fire as both a tool and a force of nature, understanding its subtle rhythms, the behavior of smoke, and the specific requirements of different types of wood. Learning to create fire was a painstaking process. Friction methods, like rubbing sticks together or using bow drills, required patience, dexterity, and precise technique. Not every attempt was successful, and the first sparks often fizzled into frustration. But once mastered, fire making became a skill of survival, carried and refined across generations. Each ember represented knowledge distilled into action, the result of observation, trial, and refinement. Maintaining fire was as crucial as creating it. A single misstep, overloading with wet wood, misjudging airflow, or failing to protect embers, could extinguish the flame, leaving a family vulnerable to frostbite, predators, and darkness. Fire management demanded constant attention, understanding of weather patterns, and an intuitive grasp of cause and effect. The glow of embers was both comforting and instructive, teaching early humans to read subtle changes in smoke and flame to anticipate problems before they became threats. Fire also shaped the spatial organization of early human shelters. Families clustered around hearths for warmth, safety, and social cohesion. Placement mattered. Too close, and sparks could ignite hides or dried grasses. Too far, and the cold would creep into sleeping areas. The arrangement of the fire became a form of engineering, balancing heat distribution, smoke ventilation, and access for cooking. Even small children learned these rules through observation, internalizing safety and efficiency without formal instruction. Cooking over fire introduced an entirely new dimension to survival. Raw food was transformed into more digestible, calorie-rich sustenance. Meat that had been dried or smoked could last longer, providing energy during lean winter months. Roots, tubers, and other plant foods became edible when heated, unlocking nutritional value that might otherwise have been inaccessible. The mastery of fire in this context was not merely convenience. It directly influenced health, longevity, and reproductive success. Fuel selection was another crucial skill. Early humans learned which types of wood burned hot and fast, which created long, lasting embers, and which produced excessive smoke that could irritate the eyes or reveal their location to predators. Twigs, branches, and bark were carefully collected and stored, sometimes protected from snow and moisture, to ensure availability during storms. Understanding the environment and the seasonal availability of fuel became a sophisticated practice, a blend of ecological knowledge and practical survival. Fire was also a psychological anchor. In the cold, dark world of the Ice Age, it offered comfort and a sense of control. The flickering light created a space for storytelling, teaching, and community bonding. Songs, rituals, and shared meals around the hearth reinforced social cohesion, transmitted knowledge, and provided mental respite from the relentless demands of survival. Even as children and adults, perform tedious or repetitive tasks. The fire offered both focus and reassurance. But fire was not without risk. A single stray spark could ignite hides, food stores, or shelters. Smoke inhalation could impair breathing, especially in poorly ventilated caves. Fire required vigilance, planning, and knowledge of the surrounding environment. Early humans developed habits, routines, and safety measures that balanced benefit and danger, a delicate equilibrium that ensured warmth without catastrophe. As night deepened, fire became a protective barrier against predators. Wolves and other carnivores, adapted to the cold, would avoid areas with active flames. The light revealed movement, while the heat created an invisible zone of safety. Fire's presence allowed early humans to sleep more securely, conserve energy, and focus on planning the next day's survival activities. Without it, the landscape was indifferent and lethal, and even the strongest humans faced constant risk. Beyond physical survival, fire also enabled early humans to experiment, innovate, and explore. They discovered methods of cooking, drying, and smoking food, refined tools with heated elements, and even created pigments for symbolic expression. Fire was a teacher, revealing the properties of materials, the behavior of the environment, and the benefits of controlled energy. Mastery of fire marked a cognitive leap, demonstrating foresight, problem-solving, and adaptive intelligence. Yet, despite its power and significance, fire demanded humility. Early humans understood that it could not be controlled recklessly. They observed, learned, and refined techniques over generations. Fire shaped their day-to-day lives, dictated schedules, and influenced social dynamics. It was both a mundane tool and a profound lifeline, illustrating how attention to small details, fuel selection, placement, and flame management was central to survival. And as night stretched across the frozen plains, the flickering hearth reminded early humans that mastery of fire was more than a skill. It was a survival strategy, a social anchor, and a measure of human ingenuity. Each ember preserved life, transmitted knowledge, and offered hope in the harshest winters. Even as you reflect on this, one question lingers: could modern humans, with all our comforts and technology, truly appreciate the intelligence, patience, and discipline required to maintain fire in an unforgiving Ice Age winter? Or did early humans' survival hinge on an extraordinary attentiveness to the mundane details we often overlook today? As time passed, early humans refined their relationship with fire, transforming it from a simple source of warmth into a cornerstone of survival strategy. Fire was not only a protective tool, but a medium through which knowledge, culture, and practical ingenuity were transmitted. Its role extended far beyond immediate warmth. It became a catalyst for efficiency, cooperation, and foresight. Daily life revolved around fire management. Early humans scheduled tasks to coincide with daylight and fuel availability, creating routines that balanced energy expenditure and risk. They learned to create multiple hearths for different functions, one for cooking, one for warmth, and another for light or signaling. This separation of purposes demonstrated strategic thinking and an understanding of cause and effect. Even small errors, such as using damp wood in a primary hearth, could jeopardize the group's safety, teaching early humans to plan, observe, and adjust constantly. Fuel selection grew into an advanced skill. Beyond identifying wood types that burned efficiently, early humans learned to store, dry, and rotate their fuel reserves. Twigs and branches were collected systematically, bark and dried grasses preserved, and larger logs split and stacked for long-term use. Some groups even developed methods to maintain slow, burning embers over extended periods, ensuring that fire could be reignited quickly after storms or long absences. These practices required foresight and consistent attention to detail, turning mundane tasks into life-saving routines. Fire's impact on food preparation and nutrition was profound. Cooking enhanced caloric intake, making it easier to extract energy from meat and plant foods alike. Boiling, roasting, and smoking allowed preservation for longer periods, which was critical during lean winter months. Early humans experimented with techniques, observing how different temperatures, durations, and fuel types affected edibility and flavor. Through repetition and careful observation, they honed methods that improved both survival odds and quality of life. the social dimension of fire continued to expand. Communal hearths fostered cooperation, knowledge sharing, and social cohesion. Firelight provided a stage for storytelling, teaching, and communal decision-making. Skills were passed from elders to children, ensuring continuity of survival knowledge. Fire also delineated space proximity, indicated warmth and safety, while the edges of the glow marked boundaries of caution. These subtle social signals reinforced hierarchy, roles, and cooperation, illustrating the intertwined nature of practical skill and human relationships. Fire was also a defensive tool. Its presence deterred predators, illuminated approaching threats, and allowed early humans to organize protective strategies. Children and adolescents learned to monitor signs of danger using shadows, smoke, and flame behavior. Even seemingly boring observations, such as noting the direction of smoke drift or the intensity of embers, became critical for anticipating risks. Fire required constant attention, reinforcing discipline, vigilance, and situational awareness. Winter brought additional challenges. Snow and wind could extinguish flames, ice could dampen stored fuel, and storms could isolate groups from reliable fire sources. Early humans developed contingency strategies, such as maintaining backup embers, sheltering fuel from moisture, and arranging firewood in ways that minimized exposure to the elements. These preparations were subtle, repetitive, and often invisible to outsiders, yet they directly influenced survival outcomes. The ability to plan for contingencies demonstrated advanced cognitive skills, patience, and adaptability. Fire also allowed early humans to experiment with their environment. They discovered that heating rocks could enhance cooking or trap efficiency, that smoke could repel insects or signal distant groups, and that fire's intensity varied with wood type, moisture content, and airflow. Through careful observation, trial, and refinement, early humans leveraged fire to manipulate their surroundings, creating a margin of safety and opportunity in an otherwise unforgiving landscape. The psychological dimension of fire cannot be understated. Its glow offered reassurance against the isolation and threat of the wilderness. Observing flames required patience, teaching focus and attention. Careful fire management reinforced confidence and competence, reminding early humans of their ability to influence survival outcomes despite environmental hostility. The mundane routines of chopping wood, tending embers, and arranging hearths became meditative exercises that supported mental resilience. Yet, despite all this preparation and skill, fire was not infallible. A sudden windstorm could snuff out a carefully maintained hearth, snow could infiltrate fuel stores, and human error could result in catastrophe. Early humans learned humility alongside mastery, understanding that survival depended on continuous attention, flexibility, and respect for the environment. These lessons, transmitted across generations, formed a foundation for enduring resilience. And as night lengthened and temperatures dropped further, early humans realized that fire was more than warmth. It was a nexus of survival, learning, social structure, and innovation. Their ability to manage, manipulate, and understand fire determined not only immediate survival, but the continuity of culture and knowledge. Each flickering flame was a testament to human intelligence, observation, and adaptability, quietly sustaining life in a harsh and unpredictable world. Yet questions remain. How many lives were lost despite careful fire management? How much knowledge was passed imperfectly? And what survival lessons were never fully learned? Could we, with all modern conveniences, truly grasp the discipline, foresight, and attentiveness early humans required to thrive in freezing conditions? As early humans matured, fire became not just a tool, but an integral part of their cognitive and social world. Its care required planning, skill, and patience, qualities that distinguished mere survival from thriving. Adolescents, having observed and practiced under the guidance of elders, often assumed responsibility for maintaining hearths, gathering fuel, and monitoring flames throughout the night. Their mastery of fire marked a crucial step toward independent survival. The interplay between fire and food remained central. Cooking transformed calories into energy, softened tough meat, and detoxified certain plant foods. Early humans developed subtle techniques, roasting small pieces of meat for faster cooking, maintaining low embers to slowly dry roots or herbs, and using smoke to preserve meat for days or weeks. Each innovation reflected careful observation, experimentation, and adaptation, an ongoing dialogue with the environment that balanced risk, reward, and sustainability. Fire management also shaped social roles. Individuals who excelled at tending flames were valued for their practical skill and foresight. Elders passed down not only techniques but also decision-making frameworks, how to allocate fuel in scarcity, when to prioritize warmth over cooking, and how to coordinate group efforts during storms or predator threats. Fire became both a practical resource and a medium for teaching strategy, cooperation, and judgment. In winter, fire's importance intensified. Freezing temperatures and snow-laden landscapes made it essential for warmth, safety, and survival. Those who failed to maintain fire faced hypothermia, frostbite, or vulnerability to predators. Observing embers, replenishing fuel, and adjusting flame intensity required constant attention. A combination of mental focus and physical coordination that shaped early humans' daily rhythm. Even small lapses could be dangerous, reinforcing vigilance as a core survival skill. Fire's influence extended beyond immediate survival. It created spaces for reflection, communication, and innovation. Social gatherings around the hearth allowed for storytelling, knowledge exchange, and reinforcement of cultural practices. Patterns observed in flame behavior could inspire new tools or techniques. Over time, the ability to manipulate fire became intertwined with broader human ingenuity, an early step toward technological adaptation and environmental mastery. Even as fire illuminated caves and warmed bodies, it also taught humility. A sudden gust could extinguish carefully tended embers, snow could drench fuel caches, and mistakes could result in disaster. Early humans learned that mastery required respect, patience, and constant vigilance. Fire was both servant and teacher. It granted safety and nourishment, yet demanded attentiveness and care. Survival depended on the delicate balance between control and observation. Mentally and socially, fire fostered resilience. Watching the dance of flames encouraged focus, patience, and cognitive engagement. Coordinating tasks around a fire reinforced cooperation and responsibility. Fire-mediated activities became the threads that wove the social fabric, connecting generations through practical knowledge and shared experience. Its presence turned mundane labor into life-sustaining routine, embedding skills that would endure across decades and communities. By the time early humans reached adulthood, they were no longer merely maintaining fire. They were shaping it to their needs. They understood its properties, its limitations, and its power. Each ember represented accumulated knowledge, skill, and foresight. Fire's management required a subtle understanding of cause and effect, timing, material properties, and human behavior. Mastery was a product of repetition, observation, and experience honed over years of attentive practice. Reflecting on these practices, it becomes clear that fire was more than warmth. It was survival intelligence made tangible. It required mental acuity, physical skill, and social coordination. Every night that embers glowed, early humans practiced a disciplined attention to detail that sustained life and strengthened community bonds. The boring repetition of splitting wood, feeding flames, and adjusting embers became the architecture of survival, quietly ensuring continuity in the harshest conditions. And yet, the question remains, how many groups failed by careful management? How many emberless nights ended in tragedy? Fire was powerful, but fragile, dependent on vigilance, knowledge, and the collective effort of the group. Modern humans, with technological abundance and controlled environments, may never fully grasp the attentiveness, patience, and ingenuity demanded to maintain life in freezing, predator-filled landscapes. The mastery of fire reminds us that survival often hinges not on strength alone but on careful, disciplined attention to the simplest elements of daily life. Through these lessons, fire emerges as a symbol of human ingenuity and endurance. It illuminates the quiet, repetitive, yet profoundly consequential acts that sustained early humans through brutal winters. Each flickering flame represents not just warmth but intelligence, patience, and the persistence that enabled humans to endure when the environment was indifferent to life. In mastering fire, early humans learned a fundamental truth. Survival is built on careful attention, to the ordinary details that make life possible in the depths of the Ice Age. When temperatures plunged and snow blanketed the land, survival depended on the ability to find and hunt prey. Unlike the more temperate seasons, winter imposed extreme restrictions. Animals became scarce, their movements predictable, yet difficult to track, and every step outside the relative safety of a shelter was fraught with danger. Early humans learned to read the landscape as a living map, noting footprints, broken branches, and subtle changes in snow patterns. Hunting in winter required meticulous observation. Footprints frozen in ice provided clues about the size, direction, and even the recent activity of animals. The compacted snow betrayed where a deer had lingered or a rabbit had burrowed. Each detail mattered. Misreading tracks could waste precious energy or lead hunters into dangerous terrain. Children, adolescents, and adults alike were trained from early on to notice these subtle markers, learning to interpret nature's signals through repeated practice and careful imitation of elders. The tools of the hunt were essential and carefully crafted. Spears, harpoons, and clubs were designed not just for effectiveness, but for durability in cold conditions. Wood could split in sub-zero temperatures, and stone tips could shatter if poorly made. Hunters learned to prepare their weapons meticulously, sharpening points and reinforcing handles. They also learned to use their environment, ice for trapping fish, snow to muffle footsteps, or natural depressions to guide animals into ambushes. Every detail was calculated, every tool reflected knowledge honed over generations. Patience was critical. Animals, though fewer in winter, often congregated in predictable areas near water sources or sheltering vegetation. Hunters would spend hours, sometimes entire days, lying still in snow-covered landscapes, waiting for prey. Cold and fatigue tested both body and mind. Success required not only skill, but discipline, subtle movements, careful breathing, and constant alertness. Observation was as important as the act of hunting itself. The physical demands of the frozen hunt were extraordinary. Moving through deep snow drained energy quickly, and exposure to wind, chill could sap strength within minutes. Hunters learned to pace themselves, layer clothing made from hides, and insulate extremities with fur. Even small errors, wet feet, insufficient insulation, or overexertion could result in frostbite or death. Survival required not only knowledge of animals and landscape, but also careful management of one's own body and resources. Cooperation often determined success. Hunting large prey required coordination, one hunter driving the animal, another positioned to strike, while others flanked or blocked escape routes. This required silent communication, understanding of group dynamics, and precise timing. Adolescents, trained in observation and mimicry from early age, began participating as assistants, learning the subtleties of strategy, positioning, and anticipation. Each participant's awareness and discipline could mean the difference between a successful hunt and wasted effort. Tracking animals also involved understanding their behavior and patterns. Early humans observed feeding habits, seasonal migration, and preferred sheltering areas. They noted which species were more cautious, which could be driven toward traps, and how weather influenced movement. This knowledge, often painstakingly acquired and transmitted orally, formed a critical layer of intelligence that allowed groups to maximize scarce resources during harsh winters. Winter hunting was also a lesson in resource management. Every kill had to be used fully, meat consumed or preserved, hides processed for clothing and shelter, bones fashioned into tools or weapons. Wasting parts of the animal could compromise the group's survival. Adolescents learned to respect these practices early, observing elders carefully as they butchered and prepared the game, understanding the connection between efficiency, resourcefulness, and long-term survival. Safety was never guaranteed. Predators, equally desperate in winter, patrolled hunting grounds. Wolves, bears, and other carnivores followed the same tracks, hunting or scavenging. Early humans learned to remain vigilant, using fire, group coordination, and strategic positioning to avoid confrontations while maximizing hunting success. Every step was calculated, every pause considered. The frozen landscape was beautiful yet indifferent, unforgiving yet navigable to those who had learned its language. Through repetition and careful observation, Early humans internalized survival strategies. What may seem mundane, the examination of a footprint, the placement of a trap, the adjustment of clothing, was essential to life itself. These quiet, persistent acts, repeated day after day, define the rhythm of survival and shape cognitive and social development in subtle, but profound ways. And yet, even the most skilled hunters faced uncertainty. Could a sudden storm obscure tracks? Could prey change patterns unexpectedly? Or could fatigue compromise a crucial strike? These questions underscored the delicate balance between skill, patience, and the unpredictable forces of nature. A balance that would test every human in the frozen world. As winter deepened, hunting required increasingly sophisticated strategy. Early humans learned to anticipate animal behavior over days or even weeks, studying feeding areas, tracks, and patterns of movement. Snow and ice became both challenge and tool. Hunters used frozen rivers, compacted snow, and ice ridges to predict where prey might pass or gather. Observation was constant, subtle, and patient. Every mark on the landscape contained information. Every displacement of snow or broken branch could reveal a hidden opportunity. The construction and use of traps grew more advanced. Simple pitfalls evolved into coordinated systems of stakes, guiding channels, and baited areas. Traps were placed in sheltered or concealed locations, often in areas predators also frequented, requiring careful timing to avoid interference. Young hunters learned these techniques through observation and trial, noting how depth, angle, and placement affected success. Mistakes were instructive. Too shallow a pit or poorly anchored stake meant failure, but repeated refinement built competence and confidence. Hunting in groups required silent communication and coordination. Signals were subtle shifts in stance, eye contact, or small hand movements indicated action without alarming prey. Hunters learned to anticipate each other's moves, developing a shared intuition honed over countless hours in harsh conditions. Coordination was a survival skill as essential as physical strength or endurance, and adolescents gradually became adept at reading both animals and human companions. The physical demands intensified with the season. Sub-zero temperatures required careful management of energy and heat. Hunters wore layered furs, insulated feet and hands, and adjusted pace to avoid exhaustion. Breaks were brief and purposeful, often spent near fire pits or sheltered areas. Fatigue could compromise judgment, slow reactions, and increase vulnerability to both environmental hazards and predators. Survival required not only skill, but disciplined management of the body. Food preservation became critical. Fresh kills were often scarce, so meat was smoked over low embers or buried in snow to slow spoilage. Early humans learned to balance immediate consumption with long-term storage, ensuring sustenance during storms or periods when hunting yielded nothing. Every aspect of preparation, from skinning to cutting, drying to storage, was precise, each step increasing the likelihood of group survival. The social dimension of hunting remained significant. Success built trust, reinforced roles, and demonstrated competence. Adolescents who contributed effectively gained status, but mistakes could carry consequences, teaching humility and careful attention to the environment. The frozen hunt was as much a lesson in social coordination as it was in physical skill, reinforcing the importance of observation, patience, and discipline. Environmental awareness was paramount. Early humans learned to read wind direction, snow texture, and temperature changes to anticipate prey movement. Even slight variations, a softening of snow under weight, a faint rustle in the distance, could indicate opportunity or danger. Survival demanded constant vigilance, acute perception, and the ability to act on subtle information. These cognitive skills, developed through repetitive practice, became second nature over time. Children and adolescents contributed by scouting, carrying small tools, and monitoring traps. These seemingly minor tasks provided crucial preparation and ensured continuity of knowledge. Learning was experiential. Every small act reinforced understanding of the environment, prey behavior, and the rhythm of winter life. Repetition, observation, and responsibility combined to cultivate skill and resilience. Predators remained a constant threat. Wolves and large cats, equally adapted to harsh winter conditions, competed for the same limited resources. Early humans learned to use fire, noise, and group coordination to deter attacks. Tracking prey also meant avoiding these predators, requiring careful route planning, timing, and assessment of risk. Survival hinged on the ability to balance offense and defense, opportunity and caution. Even with careful planning and skill, uncertainty was inevitable. Storms could obscure tracks, prey could shift behavior unexpectedly, and exhaustion or error could compromise a hunt. These challenges reinforced the importance of patience, adaptability, and observation. The frozen hunt was a continuous learning process, where success depended on combining knowledge, skill, and disciplined attention to subtle, often mundane details. Through these routines, early humans developed a remarkable capacity for endurance, cognition, and cooperation. Every day in the frozen landscape strengthened perception, decision-making, and social cohesion. The harsh winter demanded discipline, and the seemingly monotonous tasks of tracking, planning, and preparing became the foundation of survival and culture. Yet, lingering questions persisted. How many hunts ended in failure? And what were the consequences for those unable to adapt? Could the delicate balance between skill, observation, and endurance always be maintained, or was survival ultimately a matter of luck and timing? As winter dragged on, early humans, who had honed their tracking skills and learned to navigate the frozen landscape, emerged as indispensable members of their groups. Every successful hunt was a triumph of patience, observation, and careful coordination. Each kill provided not only nourishment, but also raw materials for clothing, tools, and shelter, demonstrating the interconnectedness of survival tasks. Adolescents who had participated from early age now contributed decisively, reinforcing the cycle of skill acquisition and community resilience. The culmination of winter hunts required adaptability. Even when prey was scarce or elusive, humans found ways to stretch resources. They mixed hunting with foraging, gathered frozen roots, nuts or edible lichens, and scavenged opportunistically from predator kills. Fire and preservation techniques allowed meat to last, while hides protected against frost. These combined strategies underscored the principle that survival was rarely dependent on a single skill. It was the integration of knowledge, observation, and discipline across multiple domains that ensured life endured. The social dynamics of hunting also reached a critical stage. Successful hunters gained recognition and trust, while mistakes were met with constructive correction, shaping behavior and reinforcing knowledge. Adolescents, who had learned through observation, now demonstrated leadership, mentoring younger children in the subtleties of tracking, reading the landscape, and maintaining patience. These experiences reinforced cooperation, teaching that survival depended as much on group cohesion as on individual competence. Physical endurance remained essential. Exhaustion, frostbite, or minor injuries could compromise both the hunt and the ability to care for the group. Early humans learned to ration energy, navigate treacherous terrain, and use tools to ease labor. Even mundane actions, such as layering furs properly, pacing movement through deep snow, or adjusting the placement of a trap, became critical interventions that determined whether individuals returned safely to camp. Survival was a mosaic of careful, repetitive actions, each building upon the last. Fire continued to play a central role. Evening and night activities centered around hearths, where food was prepared, clothing repaired, and weapons maintained. Fire allowed reflection on the day's hunt, sharing of observations, and planning for the next. Knowledge was transmitted through demonstration, storytelling, and guided practice. The hearth became a classroom, laboratory, and sanctuary, a constant reminder of how mastery of basic resources shaped life or death outcomes. Despite preparation, winter hunts were never guaranteed successes. Storms could erase tracks, predators could ambush humans, and prey could behave unpredictably. These uncertainties instilled humility, resilience, and adaptability. Early humans learned to accept the limits of control, to improvise solutions, and to balance risk with caution. The frozen landscape demanded respect and attentiveness. Even small lapses could carry consequences. The cumulative effect of these experiences was remarkable. Early humans developed keen observational skills, disciplined habits, strategic thinking, and cooperative instincts. Adolescents matured rapidly, acquiring cognitive and social skills through direct engagement with the environment and community. The combination of physical skill, patience, observation, and social learning became the foundation of survival, forming traditions and knowledge networks that would persist across generations. Winter hunting also left a lasting imprint on human psychology. Repetitive, focused tasks nurtured attention, problem-solving, and perseverance. Observing and interpreting subtle environmental cues enhanced cognitive flexibility. Cooperative hunts reinforced social cohesion, empathy, and shared responsibility. The seemingly mundane, boring labor of tracking, maintaining equipment, and preserving resources became central to human resilience and cultural continuity. Reflecting on the frozen hunt, it is clear that survival depended on more than strength or endurance. It required careful observation, thoughtful planning, and disciplined attention to detail. The integration of physical skill, environmental knowledge, and social coordination allowed early humans to navigate a hostile world successfully. The frozen plains, though indifferent and harsh, were navigable to those who had learned to read its signals, anticipate its challenges, and cooperate effectively. And yet, a final question lingers: how many individuals, despite all skill and preparation, fell to the unforgiving winter? How many lessons were learned too late, and how much of human resilience depended on luck alongside knowledge? These uncertainties remind us that survival in the Ice Age was both a science and an art, requiring continuous attention, adaptability, and a profound respect for the natural world. Through these experiences, the frozen hunt becomes more than a story of sustenance. It is a narrative of human intelligence, patience, and perseverance. It illustrates how careful attention to the ordinary details of daily life, even when repetitive and seemingly dull, formed the foundation of human survival, shaping both individual lives and the continuity of communities in the harshest conditions imaginable. Survival in the Ice Age demanded more than warmth from fire or the ability to hunt. It required shelter. The bitter cold, relentless winds, and deep snow made resting without protection nearly impossible. Early humans quickly learned that constructing shelters was not merely a convenience. It was a critical component of life and survival. Every structure, whether a temporary lean-to or a more elaborate cave habitation, reflected accumulated knowledge, experimentation, and adaptation. Ice, snow, and natural materials were the foundations of early shelters. Snow could be shaped into mounds, packed to form insulating walls, and reinforced with branches or animal hides. Rock overhangs and caves offered immediate protection from wind and precipitation, but their interiors often required modification. Floors were layered with furs, leaves, and grasses to insulate against the freezing ground, while walls were reinforced to prevent drafts and collapse. Each adjustment reflected careful observation of environmental conditions and material properties. The placement of a shelter was strategic. Proximity to resources such as water, game trails, and fuel sources influenced survival. Shelter orientation also mattered. Entrances were positioned to minimize wind exposure, and natural barriers, such as boulders or trees, were used to shield against storms. These considerations reveal early humans' sophisticated understanding of geography and weather patterns, even without formal mapping or measurement. Construction required coordination. Families or small groups would work together to collect materials, shape structures, and insulate interiors. Young children assisted by carrying smaller branches or furs, while adolescents learned the techniques of wall construction, roof reinforcement, and floor insulation. These tasks, though repetitive, taught observation, dexterity, and problem-solving. Survival depended on the precision and diligence of every participant. Shelter also served as a hub for daily life. Cooking, fire maintenance, tool repair, and social interaction occurred within these spaces. The design of interiors reflected both functionality and comfort. Hearths were placed to optimize heat distribution. Sleeping areas were insulated and positioned to minimize drafts, and tools were stored efficiently for immediate use. Even subtle aspects, such as arranging animal skins for bedding, demonstrated the importance of ergonomics and foresight in early human life. Weather dictated modifications. Snow accumulation could threaten structural integrity, necessitating reinforcement or clearing. Wind could penetrate poorly constructed walls, forcing adjustments in orientation or materials. Early humans learned to anticipate environmental challenges, creating shelters that were resilient and adaptable. Each decision required careful judgment. Too hasty, and the shelter might fail. Too slow, and exposure could be fatal. The materials used in construction were diverse. Wood, when available, provided structural support. Stones added stability. Furs and hides offered insulation. Early humans learned which materials retained heat, resisted moisture, and withstood repeated use. They discovered methods to layer materials effectively, combining rigid and soft elements to create structures that were both durable and comfortable. Knowledge of these properties was transmitted orally, through demonstration, and through direct experience, becoming a vital part of survival education. Shelters also played a defensive role. By controlling access points and using natural barriers, early humans could reduce encounters with predators. Elevated or concealed entrances prevented surprise attacks, while interior fire management created zones of safety. Children were often positioned near the hearth or protected areas, observing adult practices while remaining safe. Shelter design thus balanced accessibility, protection, and warmth, demonstrating an early understanding of risk management. Even in the monotony of repetitive construction, shelter building cultivated important skills: observation, planning, and resourcefulness. Early humans became adept at problem solving, understanding the limits and potentials of materials, and anticipating environmental pressures. Every successful modification improved comfort, safety, and survival odds. The process also reinforced social bonds, as collective labor necessitated coordination, shared responsibility, and communication. Yet, despite skill and planning, uncertainty remained. Shelters could fail under the weight of snow, collapse from misaligned supports, or be threatened by predators or extreme storms. Every winter tested the durability of human ingenuity, and every failure became a lesson, teaching refinements that would persist across generations. In this way, survival depended not only on immediate construction but on the slow accumulation of experience and knowledge. And so, early humans' shelters in the Ice Age were more than mere structures. They were living classrooms, laboratories, and protective sanctuaries. They reflected intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability in the face of relentless environmental challenges. And one question lingered: could any modern human truly imagine the discipline, patience, and continuous attention to detail required to thrive within these frozen homes, night after night, winter after winter? As winter deepened, the construction and maintenance of shelters became increasingly critical. Early humans quickly realized that a well-built structure could mean the difference between life and death, especially during prolonged storms or extreme temperature drops. The basic designs they had learned were constantly refined to withstand ice, wind, and snow, demonstrating the gradual accumulation of practical knowledge and technical skill over generations. One significant adaptation was the use of layered insulation. Early humans learned to stack furs, grasses, and leaves strategically, creating a barrier that trapped heat while repelling moisture. Floors were elevated with logs or rocks to reduce direct contact with the freezing ground. Roofs were reinforced with snow and branches, balancing weight distribution to prevent collapse. Even small details, such as compacting snow around the base of walls, added stability and retained warmth, reflecting careful observation and repeated experimentation. Spatial organization within shelters was critical. Hearths were positioned centrally to maximize heat distribution, while sleeping areas were placed upwind and insulated with thick layers of animal hides. Storage areas for food and tools were carefully arranged to remain accessible without compromising warmth or safety. These arrangements, although seemingly mundane, required foresight, planning, and an understanding of daily routines. They also demonstrated that early humans valued efficiency as much as survival. Children and adolescents played active roles in shelter maintenance. Younger members learned the subtleties of insulation, the importance of compacting snow, and the selection of optimal building materials. Adolescents, under adult supervision, often took responsibility for structural reinforcement, hearth management, and material gathering, These tasks, repetitive and demanding, cultivated physical skill, patience, and attention to detail, forming the foundation for lifelong survival competence. Shelters also functioned as sites of social learning. Within these insulated spaces, knowledge about construction, fire management, food preservation, and hunting techniques was transmitted. Storytelling often occurred near hearths, reinforcing cultural memory, practical strategies, and communal identity. The shelter became a nexus of both survival and social cohesion, where quiet observation and repetition nurtured cognitive and interpersonal development. Environmental challenges demanded continuous adaptation. Wind-driven snow could infiltrate poorly sealed gaps, requiring constant inspection and repair. Freezing rain could compromise walls, forcing early humans to modify structural supports or replace soaked insulation. These interventions required foresight and an intimate understanding of material properties. What might seem repetitive or mundane, checking for gaps, adjusting coverings, reinforcing beams, was, in fact, a continuous and deliberate effort to safeguard life. Early humans also experimented with shelter materials to optimize resilience. Rocks provided stability, wood offered structure, furs and hides supplied insulation. Knowledge of how each material responded to cold, weight, and moisture informed every construction decision. For example, selecting a specific type of wood that resisted cracking under sub-zero temperatures or choosing a particular fur for maximum thermal efficiency reflected careful observation, trial, and adaptation. Shelters were not purely defensive, they served strategic purposes as well. By positioning entrances away from predator paths and near known food or water sources, early humans maximized efficiency and minimized risk. Certain shelters were designed for extended occupation, allowing groups to remain in areas rich in resources, while others were temporary, supporting migration or hunting expeditions. The choice of site and construction type reflected a nuanced understanding of environmental pressures, human needs, and survival priorities. Even the seemingly tedious aspects of shelter life, such as snow removal, hearth maintenance, or routine inspections, reinforced cognitive and social skills. These activities cultivated mindfulness, patience, and an appreciation for detail, creating habits that directly influence survival outcomes. Over time, repetition of these tasks became second nature, embedding critical survival knowledge into daily routines. Yet, despite careful construction and diligent maintenance, uncertainty remained. Sudden storms, structural failures, or predator intrusion could compromise even the most skillfully built shelters. These risks reinforced the importance of vigilance, adaptability, and communal responsibility. Every repair, every adjustment, and every precaution contributed to the delicate balance between life and death in a harsh winter environment. Through these lessons, early humans learned that survival depended on constant observation, repeated effort, and meticulous care. Their shelters in the snow were not simply temporary refuges. They were dynamic systems shaped by experience, experimentation, and collective intelligence. Each insulated wall, reinforced roof, and carefully positioned hearth represented accumulated knowledge, social cooperation, and the quiet, persistent labor required to endure a brutal landscape. And one lingering question remained: how much knowledge was lost when shelters failed, or when storms destroyed weeks of preparation? How many early humans perished despite the most careful planning? And what lessons were carried forward for the next generation? These questions underscored that survival was not merely about skill, but also about the constant negotiation between human ingenuity and the unforgiving forces of nature. As the harshest days of winter pressed on, the mastery of shelter became central to survival. Early humans who had learned to construct, maintain, and adapt their homes were the ones most likely to endure. Every wall reinforced, every layer of insulation added, and every hearth carefully tended represented both immediate protection and a long-term investment in the group's well-being. Through these repetitive but essential tasks, survival was not left to chance. It was carefully managed through knowledge, observation, and disciplined labor. The integration of shelter with other survival practices was critical. Proximity to fire ensured warmth, strategic positioning facilitated hunting and foraging, insulated interiors allowed rest and recovery after exertion, Shelters became centers of planning and social cohesion, where daily routines intersected with long-term strategies for survival. Adolescents and adults alike internalized the rhythms of maintenance, learning that even small lapses, like a gap in the insulation or a neglected hearth, could compromise safety and well-being. Shelter construction also promoted social learning. Elders guided younger members, demonstrating how to select materials, reinforce walls, or layer furs effectively. These demonstrations were not just instructional, they conveyed problem-solving strategies, environmental understanding, and patience. Children absorbed lessons through observation and participation, developing skills that would carry them into adulthood and ensure the survival of the next generation. The seemingly mundane repetition of tasks became the foundation of communal knowledge and resilience. Adaptability remained crucial. Snowstorms, shifting winds, and temperature fluctuations required continuous modifications. Early humans learned to read the environment, adjusting shelters in response to changing conditions. Reinforcing walls before a storm, relocating hearths to optimize heat, or shoring up entrances against predators were deliberate, thoughtful acts. Each intervention reflected experience, observation, and an intimate understanding of the interplay between material properties and environmental pressures. The physical and cognitive demands of shelter maintenance were substantial. Moving logs, layering furs, and insulating floors tested strength and dexterity, while assessing structural weaknesses and anticipating environmental challenges engaged problem-solving and planning skills. Survival depended not only on individual effort, but also on coordination within the group. Collective action, sharing materials, distributing labor, and monitoring structural integrity ensured that no single lapse jeopardized the group. Shelters also became sanctuaries of reflection, storytelling, and knowledge sharing. Around the central hearth, early humans exchanged observations about the landscape, hunting, and animal behavior. These moments reinforced both practical skills and cultural continuity. The shelter was more than a physical structure. It was a vessel of human intelligence, where learning and experience were transmitted, preserved, and adapted over time. Even with careful construction and maintenance, uncertainty persisted. Shelters could fail under the weight of snow, be infiltrated by predators, or be rendered inadequate by sudden temperature drops. These risks instilled humility and adaptability, teaching that survival was never guaranteed. Early humans learned to anticipate contingencies, develop backup strategies, and value both preparation and flexibility. The delicate balance between effort and environmental unpredictability became a central lesson in Ice Age life. Reflecting on this, it becomes evident that the boring routines of shelter maintenance were, in fact, pivotal acts of survival. Each repetition of layering, reinforcing, and adjusting contributed to life itself. These ordinary acts, repeated over and over, built resilience, knowledge, and social cohesion. They illustrate that the foundations of human endurance were constructed not in dramatic feats, but in persistent attention to the seemingly mundane details of daily life. The legacy of Ice Age shelter building extends beyond the immediate struggle for warmth and safety. It demonstrates early humans' capacity for observation, adaptation, and cooperation. It underscores the quiet ingenuity required to survive in extreme conditions and how cumulative knowledge, passed down through generations, allowed humans to endure when nature was at its most indifferent. Yet, a final reflection lingers. How many groups never fully mastered these techniques, and how many lives were lost to incomplete knowledge or unexpected disasters? Each failure likely shaped the evolution of skill, reinforcing the critical importance of learning, adaptation, and meticulous attention to the ordinary but essential details of survival. The Ice Age teaches us that endurance was born not from heroism alone, but from patient, disciplined, and often repetitive care for the world immediately around humans. A lesson that continues to resonate even in modern life. In the relentless chill of the Ice Age, survival depended as much on clothing as it did on shelter or fire. Temperatures often plummeted well below freezing, and wind and snow added layers of danger. Early humans quickly discovered that proper clothing was not a matter of comfort. It was a critical defense against frostbite, hypothermia, and death. Every hide, fur, and woven layer was a carefully considered tool in the fight for survival. The process of creating clothing was labor-intensive. Animal hides were stripped, cleaned, and treated to remove moisture and make them more pliable. Scraping, smoking, and stretching were essential steps to ensure durability and insulation. Furs were carefully chosen for thickness, softness, and warmth, often layered in combinations that maximized thermal retention. Early humans had to understand not only the types of animals available, but also the seasonal properties of their pelts. Furs thickest in winter and thinnest in summer. Clothing design reflected both necessity and ingenuity. Tunics, leggings, and cloaks were fashioned to cover vital areas while allowing mobility for hunting, gathering, and daily tasks. Seams were sewn using sinew or plant fibers, often reinforced to withstand cold, movement, and exposure to moistures. Simple decorations, while minimal, occasionally served a purpose. Bindings and ties reinforced garments, and certain arrangements improved fit and warmth. Function dictated every decision, and experimentation shaped every generation's understanding of what worked best in extreme cold. Layering was key. Early humans learned to combine multiple garments to trap heat while preventing sweat from freezing against the skin. Base layers often consisted of softer, thinner furs for comfort, while outer layers were heavier and water-resistant. Hands and feet were protected with mittens and boots, often stuffed with insulating materials like grass, moss, or fur. Even minor details, such as wrapping strips of fur around wrists or ankles, contributed significantly to survival. The cognitive demands of clothing creation were substantial. Early humans had to assess material properties, anticipate environmental conditions, and predict how garments would perform under physical exertion. They also learned the social aspects of clothing, teaching children, sharing techniques, and observing others' methods. Adolescents and young adults gradually acquired the skill, which required both patience and precision. Mistakes could lead to inadequate protection, frostbite, or worse. Clothing was intimately tied to daily routines. Hides and furs had to be maintained, cleaned, and repaired. Early humans learned to recognize wear patterns, reinforce thin areas, and store garments to prevent moisture damage. Even the act of dunning and arranging layers required practice. A poorly fitted coat or boot could hinder movement, reduce warmth, and compromise hunting efficiency. Over time, these routines became habitual, forming a foundation of both personal skill and communal knowledge. Seasonal adaptation was critical. Winter garments were thicker, layered, and often heavier, whereas transitional clothing required balancing warmth and mobility. Early humans had to anticipate changes in weather, temperature fluctuations, and the duration of outdoor activity. Observation and experience guided these choices, allowing survival in unpredictable and extreme conditions. Clothing also served a protective function beyond warmth. It provided a barrier against cuts, abrasions, and insect bites, and it offered some camouflage while hunting. Certain furs were preferred not only for insulation, but also for their color and texture, blending with the environment to reduce visibility to prey. Early humans had to integrate functionality, environmental understanding, and resource management in every garment. Even seemingly mundane tasks, scraping hides, sewing seams, or layering furs, required focus and skill. These repetitive processes reinforced dexterity, patience, and problem solving. Young learners absorbed knowledge through participation, observation, and imitation, gradually internalizing techniques that were essential for both personal and group survival. Yet, despite meticulous preparation, uncertainty persisted. Sudden storms, prolonged exposure, or insufficient layering could result in frostbite or death. Early humans had to continuously assess risk, adjust clothing, and respond to changing conditions. Survival depended not only on skill but also on vigilance, adaptability, and foresight, a constant negotiation between human ingenuity and environmental challenge. The story of Ice Age clothing illustrates that survival was as much about preparation, observation, and attention to detail as it was about courage or strength. Each carefully crafted garment reflected understanding, experimentation, and the quiet labor of countless generations. And one question remained: could a modern human truly comprehend the patience, precision, and continual adaptation required to protect oneself in a world where frost and wind were constant threats, and every layer of clothing could mean the difference between life and death. As winter deepened and conditions became more severe, clothing evolved from simple protection into a sophisticated system of survival. Early humans observed how heat was retained or lost, how movement impacted insulation, and how moisture affected comfort. Over time, these observations led to more complex designs, layering strategies, and combinations of materials that maximized warmth, mobility, and durability. Layering became an art. Base layers of soft, flexible furs allowed movement and comfort, while mid-layers provided insulation, and outer layers shielded against wind, rain, and snow. The strategic combination of different hides, some thick, some soft, some water-resistant, enabled early humans to adapt to a wide range of temperatures and activities. Even small adjustments, like folding a fur collar over the neck or tucking leggings into boots, made measurable differences in warmth retention. Hands and feet demanded particular attention. Frostbite was a constant threat, and early humans devised specialized mittens, gloves, and boots. Insulating materials like moss grasses and extra layers of fur were stuffed into footwear, creating a barrier between skin and snow. Tight bindings around wrists and ankles prevented drafts from seeping into clothing, while layered mittens allowed dexterity without compromising warmth. Every detail was functional, tested through experience and observation over time. Adolescents and young adults were actively involved in these refinements. Learning to process hides, sew seams, and layer garments effectively required both patience and precision. Mistakes were instructive. Improperly treated fur could stiffen or lose insulation. Poorly stitched seams could tear, exposing skin to frost. Each attempt built competence, reinforcing both physical skill and problem-solving ability. The creation and maintenance of clothing became an essential training ground for survival. The maintenance of clothing was a continuous effort. Hides had to be cleaned, dried, and re-treated to maintain their protective qualities. Sewing seams required attention to tension and durability, while insulation materials needed regular replacement or adjustment. Even small, repetitive tasks, smoothing fur, tightening bindings, or checking for holes, directly influenced survival. Over time, these routines became ingrained habits, forming a rhythm of preparation and care that allowed early humans to endure extreme conditions. Clothing was closely linked to hunting, travel, and shelter. Warm, flexible garments allowed hunters to move silently and efficiently across frozen landscapes, stalk prey, and endure long periods outdoors. During migration or foraging, clothing provided protection from wind, snow, and ice, enabling individuals to cover greater distances safely. In shelters, clothing added an extra layer of insulation, working in concert with hearths, furs, and snow walls to conserve body heat. The interplay between clothing and other survival strategies highlights the comprehensive thinking required for Ice Age life. Observation was central to clothing innovation. Early humans noticed subtle differences in warmth retention between furs, how moisture affected insulation, and how layering impacted mobility. They also paid attention to the behavior of animals and the properties of different hides, experimenting with combinations that balanced function and comfort. Over time, these accumulated insights were passed from one generation to the next, creating a continuous refinement of survival strategies. Social learning played a critical role. Elders demonstrated sewing techniques, layering methods, and methods of treating hides, while adolescents practiced under supervision. Collaboration ensured that knowledge spread effectively within groups, and repetition reinforced skill acquisition. Even mundane activities, like scraping a hide or threading sinew, became vital lessons in observation, dexterity, and problem-solving. Uncertainty was a constant companion. Sudden storms, prolonged exposure, or misjudgment in layering could still result in frostbite or death. This reinforced vigilance and adaptability. Early humans learned to anticipate changing weather, prepare extra layers for extended outdoor activity, and maintain clothing meticulously. Survival required both skill and careful attention to the smallest details, where even minor oversights could have serious consequences. Ultimately, the evolution of clothing in the Ice Age exemplifies the interplay between human ingenuity, observation, and experience. The repetitive, often painstaking labor of preparing and maintaining garments laid the foundation for survival, turning ordinary tasks into life-saving strategies. Yet, one question remains: how many early humans failed to master these skills, and what toll did that take on their survival? How much of human resilience depended on careful observation, diligent labor, and the relentless refinement of techniques that, to modern eyes, might seem simple or mundane? These uncertainties underscore that survival was never guaranteed, even with skill and preparation, and that Ice Age life demanded continuous attention to both environment and craft. As the coldest months pressed on, the mastery of clothing became central to survival. Early humans who had honed their skills in hide preparation, layering, and insulation were far more likely to endure the harsh conditions. Each garment, every careful stitch, and every layer of fur represented not only immediate protection, but a tangible extension of knowledge passed down through generations. Survival depended on the meticulous attention to these ordinary details, often repeated day after day, winter after winter. The integration of clothing with other survival practices was critical. Warm garments allowed hunters to move across frozen landscapes for long periods, enabled children and adolescents to participate safely in daily activities, and complemented shelter and fire in maintaining body heat. Clothing was not simply a passive barrier against cold. It was an active tool, enabling mobility, efficiency, and the extension of human presence into an unforgiving environment. Skill and observation were continuously refined. Early humans noted how different animal hides responded to moisture, how layering influenced heat retention, and how movement affected insulation. This knowledge was shared within communities, as elders taught young members how to scrape, soften, stitch, and layer effectively. Adolescents, in turn, practiced these techniques until they became second nature, ensuring that crucial survival knowledge was transmitted reliably from one generation to the next. Maintenance remained a constant task. Hides had to be dried after exposure to snow or rain, seams checked for wear, and insulation replenished when compressed or damaged. Even small adjustments, tightening a binding, adding a layer of fur, or repositioning a cloak, could prevent frostbite or hypothermia. Through these daily, repetitive actions, early humans built resilience, skill, and an intimate understanding of their environment. The mundane tasks of clothing care were, in reality, life-saving routines. Clothing also reinforced social cohesion. Collaborative efforts in hide preparation, sewing, and layering fostered shared responsibility and trust within groups. By observing and assisting others, younger members internalized essential skills, while the group collectively increased its chances of surviving the harsh winter months. Clothing thus became a medium of knowledge transfer, cooperation, and cultural continuity, demonstrating that survival depended as much on social learning as on individual skill. Adaptability remained vital. Sudden storms, temperature fluctuations, or extended periods outdoors required ongoing adjustments. Early humans had to anticipate conditions, prepare spare layers, and modify garments to meet immediate needs. Flexibility, careful observation, and preparedness were essential, reinforcing the notion that survival was an active, continuous process rather than a static achievement. Even with mastery of these skills, uncertainty persisted. Some individuals inevitably fell victim to frostbite, illness, or exhaustion. Every failure carried lessons for the community: the importance of layering, the value of proper hide treatment, and the necessity of attentive observation. Knowledge evolved through both success and error, creating a dynamic, self-correcting system that improved survival outcomes over generations. Reflecting on the significance of Ice Age clothing, it becomes clear that survival was not solely dependent on strength, courage, or hunting skill. It rested on patience, careful observation, repetitive labor, and thoughtful adaptation. Each layer of fur, each reinforced seam, and each well-insulated boot was a testament to human ingenuity, endurance, and the quiet, persistent efforts that defined life in extreme cold. And one final question lingers: how many lives were saved simply because a seam held, a layer was correctly positioned, or a boot was properly stuffed with insulating material? How many lessons were learned too late by those who underestimated the cold or neglected the mundane routines of maintenance? The answer is unknowable, yet it reminds us that survival in the Ice Age required far more than heroism. It demanded relentless attention to detail, cooperation, and the steady, unglamorous work of protecting oneself against an unforgiving environment. Through the lens of clothing, the Ice Age teaches us that even the most ordinary, repetitive tasks can carry profound consequences. It is a story of human patience, observation, and quiet ingenuity, a testament to the subtle yet essential skills that allowed our ancestors not just to endure, but to thrive in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Hunting was more than a means of obtaining food. It was a daily challenge that shaped every aspect of early human life in the Ice Age. The frozen landscapes were unforgiving, and animals were both scarce and dangerous. Success depended on observation, skill, patience, and coordination. Hunting strategies were refined over generations, incorporating knowledge of animal behavior, seasonal patterns, and environmental conditions. Early humans learned to track animals across snow-covered terrain, interpreting footprints, broken branches, and subtle changes in the landscape. They observed herd movements, feeding patterns, and migratory routes to anticipate prey behavior. This required not only physical endurance, but acute attention to detail, memory, and the ability to interpret signs that might seem insignificant to an untrained observer. The tools used for hunting were simple in appearance, but sophisticated in application. Spears, stone-tipped arrows, and clubs were carefully crafted, their shapes and weights refined for accuracy and effectiveness. Early humans understood how to sharpen stone points, attach them securely to wooden shafts, and balance weight for optimal use. These skills were taught through repetition and close observation, with younger members learning by assisting adults and gradually assuming more responsibility. Hunting in groups increased efficiency and safety. Early humans developed strategies for cooperative hunting, including driving animals into traps, coordinating attacks, and maintaining lookout positions. Communication was often nonverbal, relying on gestures, positioning, and subtle cues. These collaborative efforts required trust, timing, and an understanding of group dynamics, reinforcing social cohesion as much as practical survival. Preparation and planning were critical. Hunters needed to assess weather conditions, terrain challenges, and the endurance of both humans and prey. They carried supplies such as spare tools, insulating clothing, and food for long excursions. These expeditions could last hours or even days, testing physical stamina, problem solving, and adaptability. A poorly planned hunt could lead to exhaustion, injury, or starvation, demonstrating the constant interplay between strategy and survival. Success in hunting directly influenced daily life. The meat provided sustenance, while hides, bones, and sinews were repurposed for clothing, shelter, and tools. Every hunt contributed to the survival of the group, and failure could have immediate consequences. This interconnectedness between hunting and other survival practices underscored the importance of skill, observation, and careful planning in early human communities. Children and adolescents observed hunting closely, often accompanying adults in supportive roles. They carried small loads, helped track signs, and learned to recognize animal behavior. This apprenticeship process ensured the transmission of knowledge and skill from one generation to the next. Mistakes were instructive, and gradual mastery allowed young humans to become competent hunters, fully integrated into the survival strategies of their group. Adaptation to environmental conditions was continuous. In extreme cold, hunters had to move silently, conserve energy, and maintain body heat. They adjusted clothing, layered furs, and timed exertion to prevent hypothermia. Wind direction, snow depth, and ice-covered terrain all influenced strategy. The Ice Age demanded constant vigilance, careful observation, and practical problem-solving in every hunting expedition. Even in moments of waiting, tracking an animal for hours, or lying in ambush, the mind was active. Early humans analyzed footprints, listened for subtle sounds, and scanned for visual cues that indicated the presence of prey. Patience, attention to detail, and disciplined observation were as essential as physical skill. These repetitive routines, though monotonous, honed cognitive abilities that were critical for survival. Yet, despite preparation and skill, uncertainty remained. Prey could escape, weather could shift unexpectedly, and exhaustion could compromise judgment. Survival depended not solely on talent, but on experience, adaptability, and collaboration. The Ice Age environment was unrelenting, and every hunt carried risks that required careful assessment, persistence, and resilience. Hunting in the Ice Age was more than a daily task. It was a cornerstone of life, shaping social structures, skill acquisition, and survival strategies. Every observation, every repetition, and every adaptation contributed to the gradual accumulation of knowledge that allowed humans to endure extreme conditions. And one lingering question remained: how did early humans balance the risks and rewards of hunting in such a relentless environment where a single misstep could determine life or death? As early humans became more experienced, hunting evolved from a purely instinctual activity into a complex, strategic practice. Observation of animal behavior informed every decision: when to approach, how to position oneself, and how to time movements to increase the chance of success. Hunters learned that patience often mattered more than speed or strength. Waiting silently in cold winds for hours sometimes yielded a more fruitful outcome than immediate pursuit. Group coordination became a critical component of successful hunts. Humans organized themselves to drive prey toward natural traps, ambush points, or areas where multiple hunters could strike simultaneously. Even subtle signals, foot placement, body orientation, or hand gestures, communicated strategy without alerting the prey. This nonverbal coordination required trust, precise timing, and an understanding of each participant's role. Mistimed movements or miscommunications could result in a failed hunt, wasted energy, or injury. Weapons and tools continued to improve through trial, error, and observation. Spear points were shaped for maximum penetration, throwing distances were tested, and the use of nets or snares emerged in certain groups. Each modification reflected knowledge of material properties, prey anatomy, and environmental conditions. The repetitive practice of crafting, testing, and using these tools reinforced both manual dexterity and cognitive problem-solving skills. Hunting also demanded acute environmental awareness. Ice, covered terrain, deep snow, and hidden obstacles required constant adaptation. Hunters had to adjust their approach depending on the condition of the ground, visibility, and wind direction. Even small miscalculations could compromise stealth or lead to injury. Over time, these repeated encounters with challenging landscapes honed skills that extended beyond hunting, influencing navigation, spatial awareness, and risk assessment in daily life. Preparation before hunting excursions was meticulous. Hunters considered clothing, layering, and insulation to prevent heat loss, while planning routes to avoid exhaustion. They also accounted for potential encounters with predators, carrying weapons and tools for defense. Food carried along the journey had to be light yet sufficient to sustain energy over long periods. Early humans quickly realized that attention to these details could be the difference between a successful hunt and a life-threatening situation. The role of youth in hunting was crucial. Adolescence began with supportive tasks, such as tracking signs, maintaining equipment, or observing patterns of prey movement. These early responsibilities taught attention to detail and introduced the fundamentals of strategy, endurance, and adaptation. Through participation, younger humans gradually acquired the experience necessary to handle more challenging aspects of the hunt. Mistakes were observed, corrected, and learned from, ensuring that knowledge was transmitted safely and effectively. Hunting was not purely a physical activity, it was deeply cognitive. Understanding animal behavior, predicting movement, and anticipating responses required observation, memory, and analytical reasoning. Early humans learned to combine these mental skills with physical coordination, patience, and precision. Repetitive, careful observation reinforced knowledge that could be applied across seasons and environments, forming the foundation of survival expertise. Collaboration extended beyond the hunt itself. After a successful kill, processing the animal required coordinated effort: skinning, butchering, and distributing meat and hides efficiently. Each step had implications for survival, ensuring that resources were not wasted and that food could be stored or preserved for future needs. The combination of hunting skill, teamwork, and practical knowledge created a self-sustaining cycle where success reinforced social cohesion and survival strategies. Uncertainty remained an inherent aspect of hunting life. Weather changes, predator interference, or unexpected prey behavior could disrupt even the most carefully planned hunts. This uncertainty taught early humans adaptability, patience, and a respect for forces beyond their control. Survival depended on continuous learning, repeated practice, and the ability to respond effectively to unpredictable circumstances. Through these patterns of observation, planning, and collaboration, early humans refined hunting into a nuanced and essential skill. It was no longer just a way to acquire food. It became a framework for understanding the environment, fostering social cohesion, and transmitting knowledge across generations. And yet, a question lingered: how often did failure shape innovation? And how many lessons were learned through trial and error that ultimately ensured the long-term survival of human communities in such unforgiving conditions? The culmination of hunting mastery in the Ice Age was the delicate balance between skill, observation, and resilience. Early humans who had honed tracking, tool-making, and cooperative strategies were the ones most likely to endure, while those who misjudged the environment or prey often faced fatal consequences. Hunting was not merely a task, it was a sustained, iterative practice, refined through observation, repetition, and continuous learning. Success depended on cumulative knowledge. Groups that carefully analyzed patterns of animal movement, monitored seasonal changes, and adapted tools and tactics accordingly enjoyed higher survival rates. Hunting was integrated with other aspects of daily life: clothing to maintain warmth, shelters to conserve energy, and food preservation strategies to endure scarcity. Each success or failure influenced the group's long-term strategies, creating a feedback loop of learning and adaptation. Processing and preserving prey required precise coordination. Once an animal was secured, meat had to be butchered efficiently, hides prepared for clothing and shelter, and bones and sinews repurposed for tools and weapons. This post-hunt activity reinforced social structures, as roles were clearly defined and collaboration was essential. Even seemingly mundane tasks, like scraping hides or cutting strips of meat, were critical, translating raw resources into usable materials that sustained survival. Hunting also shaped social dynamics. Elders, experienced hunters, guided novices, sharing techniques, strategies, and observations. Younger members learned through apprenticeship, gradually assuming more responsibility as their skills developed. Mistakes were corrected through observation and demonstration, ensuring that critical knowledge was transmitted reliably across generations. This system of social learning was as vital as any physical skill in ensuring the survival of the group. Adaptability remained essential. Environmental conditions were unpredictable. Blizzards, unseasonal warmth, or shifts in prey behavior required rapid adjustment. Hunters learned to read subtle environmental cues, modify approaches, and respond to unexpected challenges. Flexibility, keen observation, and the ability to anticipate change became as crucial as physical strength or stamina. In many ways, hunting was an ongoing exercise in critical thinking, problem-solving, and risk management. Despite careful preparation, uncertainty persisted. Not every hunt succeeded, and scarcity could lead to hunger, conflict, or exhaustion. Each failure, however, provided insights. A misjudged trail revealed the importance of careful tracking. A failed ambush demonstrated the need for patience, and a broken tool underscored the value of preparation and maintenance. Over time, these lessons accumulated, creating a body of knowledge that was essential for survival in extreme conditions. Reflecting on Ice Age hunting, it becomes clear that survival was grounded not in heroism alone, but in a combination of skill, knowledge, collaboration, and persistent attention to detail. The repetitive, sometimes monotonous routines, tracking, preparing tools, coordinating attacks, and processing prey, were the quiet acts that determined life or death. These practices exemplify how ordinary, painstaking labor became extraordinary through its impact on human endurance. And finally, a lingering question: how many lessons were lost with each failed hunt, and how many lives depended on the careful transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next? Hunting in the Ice Age was a continuous dialogue between humans and their environment, a test of observation, patience, and adaptability, and a testament to the resilience of early humans facing a relentless, unforgiving world. Through this lens, hunting emerges not just as a method of sustenance, but as a central element in the evolution of human intelligence, cooperation, and survival strategy. The Ice Age demanded that early humans not only confront the cold, the prey, and the terrain, but also the constant uncertainty that shaped their development, ensuring that each small act of skill and attention could mean the difference between life and death. Food in the Ice Age was not simply nourishment. It was survival, strategy, and adaptation wrapped into a daily challenge. Every meal required effort, planning, and knowledge of the environment. Early humans had to understand what was edible, when and where to find it, and how to process it safely. Their diet was a reflection of the harsh landscapes they inhabited, consisting of meat, plant materials, nuts, roots, and whatever resources could be reliably gathered or hunted. Meat was the cornerstone of survival, providing dense calories and essential nutrients necessary for energy and warmth. Hunting large mammals such as mammoths, reindeer, or bison offered high returns, but these hunts were risky, demanding skill, coordination, and patience. Smaller animals, rabbits, birds, and fish supplemented the diet, often requiring traps, snares, or intricate tracking. Every successful catch had to be processed, efficiently butchered, preserved, and shared among the group. No part of an animal went to waste. Hides became clothing, sinews transformed into tools, and bones served as both implements and fuel. Plant-based foods provided critical vitamins and minerals, though their availability varied seasonally and regionally. Roots, tubers, berries, and seeds were gathered when possible, offering diversity and sustenance during periods when hunting was less successful. Early humans learned which plants were safe, which needed processing to remove toxins, and how to preserve them for future consumption. This knowledge required observation, experimentation, and the careful passing of information from one generation to the next. Foraging was not a passive activity. It demanded strategy, timing, and an understanding of the environment. Plants were seasonal, weather-dependent, and often hidden beneath snow or soil. Successful gathering involved tracking growth cycles, predicting availability, and sometimes traveling considerable distances. The act of collecting food was both a physical and cognitive challenge, requiring endurance, memory, and spatial awareness. Preservation of food was equally vital. Ice Age humans developed methods to store meat and plant materials safely. Smoking, drying, and freezing were techniques adapted to the environment, allowing resources to last through periods of scarcity. Knowledge of how to prevent spoilage, deter scavengers, and protect essential stores was essential, as a single miscalculation could mean the loss of critical calories during harsh winter months. Calories were central to survival. Early humans had to consume enough energy to maintain warmth, support physical activity, and sustain cognitive function. Hunting and foraging were energy-intensive, and insufficient intake could quickly lead to exhaustion or illness. This delicate balance between energy expenditure and consumption required planning, foresight, and careful management of both time and resources. Children and adolescents participated in food acquisition, often in supportive roles. They learned to identify edible plants, assist in small hunts, or maintain food stores. Through hands-on experience, they acquired essential skills while contributing to the survival of the group. Mistakes were instructive, and gradual mastery ensured that knowledge was passed down effectively, increasing the group's collective resilience. The Ice Age diet was not uniform. It varied based on geography, climate, and available resources. Coastal communities relied on fish, shellfish, and sea mammals, while inland groups focused on terrestrial game and seasonal plants. Adaptation to local conditions required observation, experimentation, and flexibility, as what worked in one environment might be useless in another. Despite careful planning, uncertainty persisted. A failed hunt, sudden frost, or misjudged foraging expedition could threaten survival. Early humans responded with adaptability, drawing on experience, observation, and ingenuity to navigate scarcity. Each meal was therefore more than sustenance. It was a small triumph, a measure of skill, and a reflection of the constant negotiation between human effort and environmental challenge. The Ice Age diet reveals that survival was not about abundance, but about strategy, skill, and resilience. Every calorie consumed represented the culmination of labor, observation, and social cooperation. And one question remains: how much of early human survival hinged on the precise understanding of their environment, and how often did miscalculations determine who endured and who did not? Surviving the Ice Age required more than the ability to hunt or gather. It required strategic planning, foresight, and an intricate understanding of how to manage scarce resources. Food scarcity dictated movement, behavior, and social organization, compelling early humans to develop methods that balanced immediate needs with long-term survival. Each decision about what to eat, when to consume it, and how to store it carried consequences that could last days, weeks, or months. Large game provided the highest calorie return, but demanded careful preparation and coordination. Hunting a mammoth or a bison required not just physical effort, but communal strategy, setting ambush points, driving animals into traps, and ensuring that multiple individuals could act simultaneously. The distribution of meat after a successful hunt was equally strategic. Portions had to be allocated to sustain hunters, caregivers, children, and elders, while preserving enough for storage or preservation. Every cut, every shared portion, was part of a complex survival calculus. Small game and aquatic resources supplemented larger hunts. Fish, shellfish, rabbits, and birds offered quicker returns but required meticulous planning and ingenuity. Nets, snares, and primitive fishing implements reflected a sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, habitats, and timing. Observing migration patterns, nesting habits, or feeding routines allowed early humans to maximize efficiency and reduce energy expenditure, while securing essential calories. Plant-based foods were often overlooked in popular imagination, but were critical for health and survival. Roots, tubers, berries, seeds, and leaves provided essential vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Foraging demanded knowledge of seasonal cycles, terrain, and plant identification. Many edible plants required processing, boiling, roasting, or leaching to remove toxins or enhance digestibility. Early humans refined these methods over generations, learning through experimentation which techniques were safe and effective. Preservation techniques were essential, particularly in harsh winters or periods of scarcity. Smoking, drying, freezing, and storing foods in insulated caches ensured that critical calories were available even when hunting or foraging was unsuccessful. Preserved meat could sustain communities through blizzards or extended cold snaps, while dried plants provided variety and nutrition when fresh resources were unavailable. Understanding how to store food safely required both practical skill and careful observation of environmental conditions, such as humidity, temperature, and predator behavior. Children learned the rhythms of the diet early. They were introduced to the identification of edible plants, the tracking of small game, and the care of stored food. These lessons combined observation with hands-on practice, ensuring that essential survival knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Even the smallest tasks, scraping meat, inspecting caches, or gathering berries, taught patience, attention to detail, and an appreciation for the fragile balance between effort and reward. Energy management was a constant concern. Early humans had to weigh the caloric cost of hunting or gathering against the potential gains. Long treks for food, labor, intensive processing, and exposure to the elements could deplete reserves faster than they were replenished. Success depended on calculated risk, careful assessment of conditions, and the ability to make quick adjustments when circumstances changed. This balancing act reinforced adaptability, planning, and problem-solving skills, which were crucial for both survival and social cohesion. The Ice Age diet also influenced social structures. Communities organized around access to food sources, cooperative hunting, and shared foraging responsibilities. Knowledge of when and where to hunt, gather, or store food was often concentrated among elders or experienced hunters who guided younger members in learning these critical skills. Cooperation and shared responsibility were essential. Without coordination, individual survival became significantly more precarious. even with careful preparation. Unpredictability remained a central challenge. Animals migrated unexpectedly, plants failed to flourish, and sudden weather shifts could eliminate resources in a matter of hours. Early humans had to remain vigilant, flexible, and inventive, adjusting strategies and leveraging their accumulated knowledge to navigate scarcity. Each meal was a negotiation with the environment, a moment where survival skills, social cooperation, and resource management intersected. Ultimately, the Ice Age diet demonstrates that survival was as much about strategy, observation, and learning as it was about strength or endurance. Every bite consumed was the product of careful planning, communal effort, and an intimate understanding of the environment. And one lingering question arises: how did early humans decide which risks were worth taking? And how many innovations in diet and food storage emerged from the pressures of scarcity and necessity? As the Ice Age progressed, the knowledge and strategies surrounding diet became increasingly sophisticated. Early humans who mastered hunting, foraging, and food preservation were more likely to endure prolonged winters and periods of scarcity. Their survival depended on the careful coordination of resources, the observation of environmental cues, and the continuous refinement of techniques that ensured both immediate sustenance and long-term security. Large game remained a crucial source of calories, but hunting it required not only physical prowess, but also ingenuity and planning. Collaborative hunts involved driving animals toward ambush points, tracking herds across vast frozen landscapes, and coordinating attacks among multiple participants. Every detail, from timing to positioning to tool selection, impacted the likelihood of success. The careful sharing and preservation of the resulting meat reinforced community cohesion and ensured that no energy or resources were wasted. Small game and plant-based foods played equally vital roles. Fish, birds, berries, roots, and tubers provided essential nutrients and supplemented the high-calorie meat intake. Foraging was an exercise in observation, patience, and careful selection. Seasonal variation dictated which plants or animals were available at any given time, requiring a flexible approach and an intimate understanding of local ecosystems. Early humans experimented, learned, and adapted, creating a repertoire of strategies to mitigate the unpredictability of the natural world. Food preservation techniques became a cornerstone of survival. Drying, smoking, freezing, and storage in insulated caches extended the usability of perishable resources. These practices were essential during the harshest months, when hunting became difficult and fresh plants were scarce. Properly preserved food could mean the difference between survival and starvation, highlighting the importance of routine, diligence, and careful observation. Children and adolescents were integrated into the food economy from a young age. They assisted with gathering, processing, and storage tasks, gradually building practical skills and reinforcing knowledge transmission within the community. These apprenticeships ensured that each generation inherited the collective wisdom of its predecessors, providing continuity and stability even in the face of environmental challenges. Mistakes during learning were instructive, fostering adaptability and problem-solving skills critical for survival. Energy management remained a daily concern. Every expedition, hunt, or foraging trip had to be weighed against the calories expended. Miscalculations could result in exhaustion or hunger, underscoring the delicate balance required to endure the environment. Early humans learned to optimize routes, timing, and techniques to maximize returns while conserving energy, a practice that demanded both experience and foresight. Social structures were shaped by food access and distribution. Communities relied on cooperation, with elders or skilled hunters guiding others in best practices. Coordination and communication were essential. The success of one hunt or gathering trip influenced the well-being of the entire group. These interdependencies reinforced trust, shared responsibility, and social cohesion, factors as critical to survival as the food itself. Even with careful planning and collaboration, uncertainty persisted. Sudden weather changes, unexpected animal behavior, or failure of preservation methods could disrupt even the most meticulously organized strategies. Early humans had to respond quickly, adapt plans, and leverage experience to navigate these challenges. Their survival was a continuous negotiation with an unpredictable environment, requiring resilience, observation, and flexible problem solving. The Ice Age diet underscores that survival was never accidental. It was the product of careful observation, strategic planning, and relentless adaptation. Every meal represented the culmination of learning, cooperation, and environmental awareness. Human ingenuity was expressed not only through tools and weapons, but through the careful management of resources, the transmission of knowledge, and the persistent attention to detail that ensured endurance in extreme conditions. And one final thought lingers: how many lives were determined by a single decision? Choosing one plant over another, following one trail instead of another, preserving a portion of meat just in time. The diet of Ice Age humans illustrates that survival was shaped as much by foresight, patience, and cooperation as by strength or skill. It is a testament to the quiet, meticulous practices that allowed early humans to endure in one of the harshest climates the planet has ever known. In the Ice Age, shelter was far more than a place to sleep. It was a matter of life and death. Survival depended on protection from relentless winds, biting cold, and sudden snowstorms. Early humans quickly learned that enduring the harsh climate required ingenuity, adaptability, and careful use of available materials. Every choice in constructing a shelter, from location to materials to design, was guided by observation, trial and error, and accumulated knowledge passed through generations. Natural features often dictated the first choices in shelter. Caves, rock overhangs, and dense groves offered immediate protection from the elements. These natural refuges were often chosen for their insulation, proximity to water sources, and ease of access to food. However, not all groups had the luxury of such locations. For those in open plains or tundra regions, humans had to construct shelters from raw materials, a task requiring both creativity and practical skill. Materials were carefully selected based on availability and effectiveness. Animal hides provided insulation, while branches, bones, and stone created structural support. Moss, grasses, and leaves were layered for additional warmth and to reduce moisture penetration. Early humans developed techniques for fastening and layering these materials, creating shelters that were surprisingly durable and effective against extreme cold. Every component was evaluated for function, durability, and contribution to overall warmth. The design of shelters reflected an intimate understanding of the environment. Wind direction, snow accumulation, and sun exposure all influenced orientation and shape. Simple windbreaks or low walls could deflect icy gusts, while entrance placement minimized heat loss. In some cases, semi-subterranean structures were excavated to take advantage of natural insulation from the earth, maintaining more stable temperatures inside than in the surrounding environment. Fire played a central role in shelter design. Hearths were positioned to maximize heat distribution while minimizing smoke accumulation. Smoke could also serve as a deterrent for predators, adding another layer of security. The combination of structural design and controlled fire allowed early humans to create microenvironments that mitigated some of the harshest effects of the Ice Age climate. Daily maintenance was essential. Insulating materials required repair after storms or heavy snowfalls. Fires needed consistent attention to maintain warmth, and shelters had to be cleaned and reinforced regularly. These repetitive, often monotonous tasks were central to survival, demonstrating that endurance was not merely a matter of strength, but of diligence, observation, and attention to detail. Social organization was closely tied to shelter construction. Building or maintaining a shelter required cooperative effort. Community members worked together, sharing labor and knowledge. Young members learned construction techniques by observing and assisting elders, gradually gaining the skills necessary to contribute independently. This apprenticeship process ensured that shelter building knowledge persisted across generations. Enhancing group survival, shelter also influenced daily routines and social interaction. It provided a space for food preparation, tool making, and resting between hunting or foraging excursions. The layout of a shelter could optimize workflow with designated areas for specific activities. Beyond practical utility, shelters fostered social cohesion, creating a sense of shared responsibility and protection among group members. Adaptability remained critical. Storms, shifting snowdrifts, or seasonal temperature changes required modifications to existing shelters. Temporary structures were often supplemented with additional layers of insulation or relocated to more favorable sites. These adjustments reflected the continuous negotiation between human ingenuity and environmental unpredictability. Even with well-constructed shelters, uncertainty persisted. Caves could collapse, materials could fail, and extreme storms could overwhelm defenses. These risks reinforced the importance of redundancy, preparation, and ongoing observation. Early humans understood that survival depended not only on immediate protection, but also on the ability to respond to unexpected challenges. The story of Ice Age shelters demonstrates that survival was rooted in both practical skill and social cooperation. Every branch positioned, every hide layered, and every fire tended contributed to human endurance. And one lingering question remains: how many lives were saved or lost based on the subtle differences in shelter construction? And how much knowledge was quietly passed down through the repetitive, patient work of building and maintaining homes in the frozen wilderness? As the Ice Age persisted, early humans refined shelter construction techniques to cope with increasingly harsh conditions. Survival demanded more than instinct. It required careful observation, experimentation, and collaboration. Every decision, from choosing the site to selecting materials and designing the structure, was informed by experience, and lessons learned from previous failures were critical for future success. Natural shelters, such as caves and rock overhangs, were highly prized for their insulation and stability. Yet they were limited in number and often shared among multiple groups, introducing a social dimension to shelter use. Negotiating access to these locations required diplomacy, cooperation, or strategic avoidance, demonstrating that survival was not only a matter of physical skill, but also of social awareness and adaptability. When natural shelters were unavailable, humans built temporary and semi-permanent structures. They experimented with a variety of designs, from simple lean, tossed to dome-shaped huts constructed from interwoven branches, animal hides, and stones. Each innovation reflected an understanding of structural stability, insulation, and environmental protection. For example, dome-shaped structures shed snow effectively, while low-profile forms minimized exposure to cold winds. The selection and preparation of materials were methodical. Branches were chosen for strength and flexibility, bones were used where wood was scarce, and hides were layered for warmth. Moss, grass, and leaves were packed between structural layers to reduce drafts and increase insulation. These methods required repetitive practice, careful observation, and a deep understanding of the properties of each material. The durability of a shelter depended on attention to detail and the application of accumulated knowledge. Fire remained central to shelter survival. Beyond providing heat, fire served as a light source, a means of cooking food, and a deterrent for predators. Hearths were carefully positioned to maximize heat retention and reduce smoke inhalation, reflecting a sophisticated awareness of airflow and thermal dynamics. Maintaining a fire required vigilance. Early humans needed to manage fuel, prevent accidental extinguishing, and keep embers alive through the night. Inadequate fire maintenance could have immediate consequences, from cold exposure to the failure of preservation methods for food. Shelters were hubs of social learning. Adults instructed younger members in construction, maintenance, and adaptation techniques. Children participated in layering hides, reinforcing walls, or carrying materials, gaining practical experience while contributing to group survival. This process ensured the transfer of crucial skills, reinforcing both community cohesion and individual competence. Each generation refined techniques, incorporating subtle improvements based on past experience. Adaptability was critical in shelter management. Snow accumulation could threaten the stability of a roof, necessitating reinforcement or reconstruction. Seasonal shifts required additional insulation or relocation. Wind direction, sunlight, and proximity to water sources influenced the placement and design of structures. These environmental variables demanded ongoing assessment and flexibility, reinforcing the continuous dialogue between humans and their surroundings. Resource management extended to shelter maintenance. Materials were conserved and repurposed whenever possible. A branch that no longer supported a wall might be used as firewood. Hides could be replaced or patched using remnants from other animals. These practices demonstrated efficiency, foresight, and a pragmatic approach to survival where waste could be fatal. Despite careful planning, uncertainty remained. Storms could destroy structures, snow could collapse roofs, or predators could breach defenses. These risks highlighted the importance of redundancy, vigilance, and communal effort. Groups that succeeded in building resilient shelters were better equipped to withstand the unpredictable forces of the Ice Age environment, while those who failed often faced severe consequences. The story of Ice Age shelters illustrates that survival depended on the integration of skill, observation, and social cooperation. Each layer of hide, each branch positioned, and each fire tended was part of a larger strategy of endurance. And a question persists: how did early humans balance immediate shelter needs with the long-term investment of time and resources? And how many innovations in construction arose from the urgent pressures of survival in a frozen world? The ultimate goal of Ice Age shelter construction was not just protection from the elements. It was the creation of a stable environment that enabled survival, social cohesion, and continuity of knowledge. Over time, early humans refined their techniques, developing shelters that combine practicality, durability, and adaptability. Each structure reflected the delicate balance between available resources, environmental challenges, and the ingenuity required to endure them. Communal effort was at the heart of shelter success. No individual could build a robust dwelling alone. It required coordination, cooperation, and shared labor. Adults and children alike contributed to construction, maintenance, and repair. Roles were assigned according to skill, age, and experience, ensuring that every member of the group had a part in survival. This collaborative system strengthened social bonds and reinforced the importance of shared responsibility, trust, and communication. Material selection and preparation reached an advanced level of sophistication. Branches, bones, hides, and plant matter were meticulously chosen for their properties, layered to maximize insulation, and fastened with precision. The same knowledge that informed construction also guided repair and adaptation. Seasonal changes, snow accumulation, and environmental shifts necessitated modifications, demonstrating the continuous need for observation, innovation, and vigilance. Fire remained a crucial component of shelter life. Beyond providing warmth, it enabled cooking, food preservation, and protection against predators. Hearth placement, fuel management, and fire maintenance were critical skills, demanding constant attention and practical knowledge. A well-tended fire transformed a simple structure into a microenvironment capable of sustaining life in conditions that would otherwise be lethal. Shelters were also educational spaces. Young humans learned by observation and participation, gradually acquiring the skills needed to construct and maintain their own dwellings. The transfer of knowledge was methodical. Techniques were taught, mistakes were corrected, and solutions to environmental challenges were shared. This ensured continuity and incremental improvement over generations, reinforcing both survival and cultural knowledge. Adaptability remained essential. Ice Age climates were unpredictable. Storms could arrive suddenly, temperatures could plummet, and resources could shift unexpectedly. Shelters were designed not as static structures, but as adaptable spaces, capable of adjustment or reinforcement in response to environmental pressures. This flexibility was a testament to the cognitive and practical ingenuity of early humans, reflecting a deep understanding of the natural world. Despite careful planning and construction, unpredictability was ever present. Roofs could collapse, walls could fail, or predators could breach defenses. These uncertainties reinforced the importance of redundancy, vigilance, and strategic planning. Groups that successfully adapted were rewarded with survival, while those who failed often faced fatal consequences. Shelter was both a physical barrier and a symbol of human ingenuity in the face of relentless environmental challenges. The Ice Age demonstrates that survival was rarely about heroics or sudden breakthroughs. It was the result of careful observation, patient labor, and collective effort. Each layer of hide, each position branch, and each tending of the fire contributed to a web of practices that sustained human life. Shelters were more than structures, they were instruments of endurance, shaping social interactions, education, and long-term survival strategies. And finally, a lingering thought: how much of modern architecture and knowledge about insulation, spatial organization, and environmental adaptation traces back to these humble beginnings. The meticulous, sometimes monotonous labor of Ice Age humans laid the foundation for human resilience, demonstrating that survival is as much about persistent, careful practice as it is about strength or skill. In the Ice Age, clothing was not a matter of fashion or self-expression. It was essential for survival. The biting cold, harsh winds, and sub-zero temperatures made protection from the elements a daily necessity. Early humans quickly learned that without proper insulation, exposure could lead to frostbite, hypothermia, or death. The development of clothing represented a combination of observation, ingenuity, and practical skill, as humans discovered ways to use available materials to shield themselves from the relentless environment. Animal hides and furs formed the foundation of Ice Age clothing. Skins from hunted animals were carefully cleaned, tanned, and fashioned into garments that covered the body while retaining flexibility. The layering of hides provided additional insulation, trapping heat and creating a barrier against wind and moisture. Every selection of fur or hide was intentional, with different textures and thicknesses chosen for specific purposes. Thicker pelts for outer layers, softer furs for inner comfort. Preparation of these materials required skill and knowledge. Tanning hides was a labor-intensive process involving scraping away flesh and fat, soaking skins, and using natural substances to soften and preserve them. Once prepared, hides were cut and sewn using bone needles and sinew threads. Each stitch had to be precise. Gaps could allow heat to escape or moisture to penetrate, reducing effectiveness. Early humans learned through practice, experimentation, and observation, gradually improving their techniques across generations. Clothing extended beyond simple protection. It allowed mobility and survival in challenging environments. Boots and wraps shielded feet from snow and ice, while gloves and mittens preserved hand function for hunting, tool making, and daily tasks. Head coverings and cloaks provided additional protection, minimizing heat loss in critical areas. These adaptations were the result of careful observation of both human physiology and environmental demands, demonstrating a pragmatic understanding of how to maintain warmth while remaining functional. Layering was an essential strategy. Multiple garments of varying thickness and material were combined to maximize insulation while allowing movement. This approach reflected a sophisticated understanding of heat retention, body mechanics, and the practical needs of daily life. Adjustments could be made depending on activity level, temperature, and duration of exposure, allowing early humans to balance warmth with energy expenditure. Children learned the importance of clothing from an early age. They were taught to prepare hides, repair garments, and layer clothing appropriately. These lessons were not merely about comfort, they were about survival, observing elders, assisting in garment construction, and participating in maintenance ensured that crucial knowledge persisted across generations. Each skill acquired contributed to the overall resilience of the group, reinforcing the social and practical dimensions of clothing. In addition to insulation, clothing offered protection from environmental hazards. Sharp ice, thorny vegetation, and abrasive surfaces could injure exposed skin, potentially leading to infection. Garments made from hides and furs mitigated these risks, while also serving as a barrier against insects and other minor threats. Functionality, durability, and adaptability were paramount considerations in every clothing design. Resource management was integral to clothing production. Hides were valuable, and careful use ensured that every part was utilized. Scraps were repurposed for smaller garments, wraps, or repairs. This efficiency reflected a deep understanding of scarcity and the importance of maximizing the utility of every resource. Wasting materials could jeopardize survival, highlighting the connection between meticulous labor and life or death outcomes. Even with well-prepared clothing, the environment remained unpredictable. Sudden storms, shifting snowdrifts, or unexpected exposure could challenge even the best prepared individuals. Adaptability, observation, and rapid response were as essential as clothing itself. Early humans developed an intuitive sense of how to adjust layers, seek shelter, and protect vulnerable body parts, combining practical skill with environmental awareness. The story of Ice Age clothing illustrates that survival was as much about knowledge, skill, and social learning as it was about strength. Every stitched hide, every layered garment, and every carefully prepared piece of clothing contributed to human endurance in extreme conditions. And a lingering question remains: how many lives depended on subtle decisions in material selection, layering, and garment construction? And how did these innovations shape the development of human resilience in harsh climates? As the Ice Age progressed, the demands on clothing became increasingly complex. Survival required more than covering the body. It demanded garments that balanced insulation, flexibility, and durability. Early humans adapted their techniques to suit changing climates, seasonal variations, and the diverse terrains they inhabited. Each innovation reflected a careful observation of both human needs and environmental challenges. Animal hides remained the primary material, but humans developed specialized methods for improving their warmth and longevity. Scraping, tanning, and softening hides ensured that garments were both durable and comfortable. Certain furs were selected for outer layers to repel wind and moisture, while softer, finer furs lined inner layers to trap body heat. This strategic use of materials demonstrated an early understanding of thermoregulation and material properties, ensuring that humans could function effectively even in extreme conditions. Garment design became more sophisticated over time. Tunics, cloaks, leggings, and boots were tailored to fit individual bodies, allowing for mobility while minimizing heat loss. Fastening techniques, including the use of bone pins, sinew ties, and rudimentary belts, enabled adjustments to fit, layering, and activity level. These adaptations allowed humans to remain active in harsh climates without compromising warmth, a critical balance for survival during hunting, foraging, and shelter maintenance. Children continued to learn practical clothing skills as part of their survival education. They participated in tanning hides, sewing garments, and layering clothing appropriately for varying conditions. These activities were more than chores. They were hands-on lessons in observation, patience, and skill transfer. Mistakes during learning were instructive, reinforcing the importance of precision and careful workmanship in clothing preparation. Over time, these accumulated skills became essential components of communal resilience. Clothing also played a role in protection beyond temperature regulation. Frostbite, abrasions, and insect bites could threaten health and survival. Constructed garments minimized exposure to these hazards, providing an additional layer of security. Boots and wraps protected feet from snow and ice, while gloves and mittens ensured that hands could perform essential tasks without succumbing to cold. Head coverings and cloaks further reduced heat loss, highlighting the integrated approach early humans applied to protective clothing. Fire and shelter complemented clothing, but did not replace the need for insulation. Humans had to anticipate periods when they would be away from hearths or protective structures, such as hunting expeditions or long foraging trips. Clothing had to provide sufficient warmth independently, maintaining body heat during prolonged exposure. The combination of insulated garments, layered construction, and strategic use of materials was vital for maintaining energy, preventing hypothermia, and sustaining physical performance. Resourcefulness was key. Scraps of hide were repurposed for smaller garments, repairs, or insulation in sleeping areas. The careful management of materials ensured that nothing was wasted, and that clothing could be maintained over long periods, even when hunting yields were low or certain resources scarce. Efficiency in material use was directly linked to survival, highlighting the meticulous attention to detail that characterized daily life in the Ice Age. Adaptability remained critical. Seasonal changes demanded adjustments to clothing layers, materials, and fit. Sudden storms or temperature drops required quick modifications, and humans learned to respond intuitively to shifting conditions. This flexibility reflected both cognitive skill and practical experience, demonstrating that survival depended on continual adaptation rather than static solutions. Social organization was also influenced by clothing practices. Knowledge of preparation, layering, and repair was transmitted through observation, teaching, and collaborative work. Skilled individuals guided others in these techniques, ensuring that communities could function efficiently despite environmental pressures. Clothing became a tangible representation of shared knowledge and collective effort, as well as a practical tool for endurance. Even with well-constructed garments, the Ice Age environment remained unpredictable. A sudden blizzard, deep snowdrifts, or prolonged exposure could challenge even the most carefully prepared humans. Survival required not only clothing but also awareness, adaptability, and strategic decision-making. Early humans developed an intricate understanding of how to combine garments with movement, shelter, and fire to maximize protection and maintain function. The story of Ice Age clothing illustrates that survival depended on a combination of observation, skill, and careful planning. Each garment represented the culmination of accumulated knowledge, experimentation, and collaborative effort. And one question lingers: how many lives were saved by a well-tanned hide or a carefully layered outfit? And how many innovations in clothing arose purely from necessity? As humans adapted to some of the harshest conditions on Earth, the culmination of Ice Age clothing practices highlights the extraordinary ingenuity and persistence of early humans. Survival was not simply a matter of endurance. It required creativity, meticulous labor, and careful observation. Each garment, from a thick fur cloak to a pair of layered boots, represented the intersection of necessity, skill, and cumulative knowledge honed over generations. Communal cooperation was at the heart of clothing production and maintenance. Groups worked together to prepare hides, sew garments, and repair wear and tear. Experienced members taught younger individuals essential techniques, ensuring continuity of survival skills. Children learned through participation, gradually acquiring the practical knowledge necessary to construct and maintain protective clothing independently. This intergenerational transfer of expertise was critical, reinforcing both survival and social cohesion. Material selection and preparation reached an advanced level of sophistication. Certain furs were reserved for specific garments: thicker, coarse pelts for outer layers and softer, finer furs for insulation close to the skin. Tanning techniques improved durability and comfort, and precise stitching ensured garments retained heat while allowing mobility. Even minor adjustments, securing a seam, adding an extra layer, or repositioning a tie, could have a significant impact on warmth and survival. Fire complemented clothing, but could not replace it. During expeditions, hunts, or foraging trips away from shelter, clothing provided the primary defense against freezing temperatures. Layering strategies and material choices were continuously refined to maximize heat retention while minimizing bulk, allowing humans to remain active, maintain energy, and avoid frostbite or hypothermia. The integration of clothing, fire, and shelter demonstrates the sophisticated understanding early humans had of environmental challenges and survival strategies. Adaptability was essential. Seasonal fluctuations, unexpected storms, and changes in available resources required constant evaluation and modification of garments. Humans learned to combine clothing with other survival strategies, adjusting layers, repairing worn hides, and combining old and new materials. This flexibility was a hallmark of Ice Age ingenuity, emphasizing that survival relied on both physical skill and cognitive ability to anticipate and respond to change. Protection from the environment extended beyond warmth. Clothing shielded against abrasions, insect bites, and minor injuries, while also preserving mobility. Boots, wraps, gloves, and cloaks enabled humans to move efficiently through snow, ice, and rugged terrain, ensuring that hunting, foraging, and daily tasks could continue even in harsh conditions. Every element of clothing served a functional purpose, illustrating the careful attention to both survival and practicality. The broader impact of clothing practices reveals an early understanding of resource management and strategic planning. Hides were used judiciously, scraps repurposed, and garments repaired rather than discarded. Efficiency in material use was directly linked to survival, as wasted resources could mean hunger, exposure, or death. Clothing was both a practical tool and a reflection of human ingenuity and foresight. Ultimately, the story of Ice Age clothing demonstrates that survival depended on the integration of skill, observation, social cooperation, and adaptability. Each layer, stitch, and repaired garment contributed to human resilience in one of the harshest environments on Earth. And one final reflection remains: the meticulous labor, creative problem solving, and intergenerational knowledge that sustained early humans in extreme cold laid the foundation for human innovation, demonstrating that survival is often the product of careful, persistent effort rather than extraordinary feats of strength or heroism. Hunting in the Ice Age was not a casual endeavor, it was a matter of survival. Every meal depended on the careful observation of animal behavior, environmental patterns, and strategic planning. Early humans quickly learned that brute strength alone was insufficient. Success required cooperation, patience, and a deep understanding of the landscape and its inhabitants. Large game, such as mammoths, reindeer, and bison, provided high-calorie meat essential for survival in freezing conditions. But hunting such creatures was complex and dangerous. Groups often coordinated drives, herding animals toward traps or cliffs. Each participant had a role. Some distracted the animals, others guided them along predetermined paths, and skilled hunters struck at the critical moment. Timing, positioning, and knowledge of animal behavior determined success or failure, and mistakes could be fatal. Tracking skills were essential. Humans observed footprints, broken branches, and feeding patterns to predict where animals might appear. They studied migration routes, seasonal behavior, and herd dynamics, building a detailed understanding of prey movement. These skills were not innate, they were taught, practiced, and refined through repetition. Young members of the group learned by shadowing experienced hunters, gradually acquiring the expertise necessary to contribute meaningfully to the hunt. Tools transformed hunting practices. Spears, atlals, and later bows allowed humans to strike from a distance, reducing risk while increasing effectiveness. Stone points were shaped carefully for penetration and durability, while wooden shafts were selected for strength and flexibility. Tool making required patience and skill, as poorly made weapons could fail at a critical moment. Even minor design improvements could increase the likelihood of capturing prey, demonstrating the connection between innovation and survival. Hunting was also an exercise in energy management. Large game required coordinated, sustained effort, often over long distances and hours of exposure to the elements. Humans had to balance the calories expended against the potential reward, optimizing strategy to conserve energy while maximizing success. Miscalculations could result in exhaustion or failure, underscoring the delicate balance between risk and reward inherent in Ice Age hunting. Small game and aquatic resources supplemented large game hunting. Birds, fish, and small mammals provided essential protein and nutrients when large prey was scarce. These hunts required different techniques, traps, snares, fishing tools, but were equally important for maintaining energy balance. Flexibility in approach allowed early humans to exploit diverse food sources and adapt to seasonal availability. Social structures were intertwined with hunting practices. The distribution of meat reinforced social bonds, with elders or skilled hunters often guiding allocation to ensure group survival. Cooperation extended beyond the hunt itself. Preparation, butchering, and preservation were communal tasks requiring coordination, trust, and shared responsibility. These processes fostered cohesion and ensured that knowledge and skills were transmitted across generations. Even with meticulous planning, hunting was unpredictable. Animals could escape, storms could interrupt drives, and terrain could present unexpected obstacles. Early humans had to anticipate challenges and adjust strategies on the fly. Observation, flexibility, and experience were as critical as tools or strength in determining the success of a hunt. The story of Ice Age hunting demonstrates that survival depended on observation, strategy, and collaboration. Each hunt required careful planning, precise execution, and adaptability in the face of uncertainty. And one lingering question remains: how many early humans survived or perished based on a single decision, choosing the right path, the right time, or the right prey? And how did these experiences shape the evolution of human cooperation and ingenuity in the frozen wilderness? As Ice Age humans gained experience, their hunting strategies became increasingly sophisticated. Survival depended on understanding not only the behavior of prey, but also the dynamics of the environment. Hunters had to anticipate seasonal patterns, terrain challenges, and the habits of herd animals. This required careful observation, planning, and coordination, skills that were continuously honed over time. Group hunting was central to success. Large animals like mammoths and bison posed enormous challenges. A single hunter could not take down such prey alone. Early humans developed coordinated drives, often guiding herds toward natural traps, cliffs, or constructed pitfall areas. Each member had a defined role. Some flanked the herd to prevent escape, others blocked pathways, while the most experienced struck with precision at critical moments. Success depended on timing, communication, and trust among participants. Tracking skills were indispensable. Hunters examined footprints, droppings, broken branches, and other subtle signs to locate prey. Seasonal migrations were memorized, along with feeding grounds and resting areas. Knowledge of animal behavior allowed humans to predict movement and plan hunting routes with remarkable accuracy. Young group members learned by shadowing seasoned hunters, gradually internalizing patterns, techniques, and strategies. These lessons ensured that survival skills were passed from one generation to the next. Embedding experience into the social fabric of the group, tools continued to evolve, enabling more effective hunting. Stone, tipped spears at lattles, and eventually early bows increased range and lethality, reducing risk for hunters. Crafting these tools required skill, patience, and foresight. Materials were carefully selected: dense wood for shafts, sharp stones for tips, and sinew or plant fibers for bindings. Even minor innovations, a more aerodynamic spear or a reinforced bow, could dramatically increase hunting success. This demonstrates how survival was intimately connected to ingenuity and technical skill. Hunting was also a balance of energy expenditure and gain. Large game hunts were physically demanding, requiring endurance, coordination, and careful pacing. Hunters had to consider the distance traveled, the time spent tracking, and the energy spent in pursuit, weighing it against the potential caloric return from the prey. Miscalculations could result in wasted effort, exhaustion, or even death, making strategic planning essential. Small game and alternative food sources complemented large game hunts. Fishing, trapping, and bird hunting provided reliable nutrition when larger prey was scarce. These activities required different skills, such as crafting nets or snares, setting traps, and understanding seasonal patterns. Early humans displayed flexibility, switching between techniques and prey types depending on environmental conditions, availability, and group needs. The social dimension of hunting extended beyond the act itself. Once prey was captured, communal effort ensured its full utilization. Butchering, preserving, and distributing meat required coordination and knowledge. Skilled hunters and elders often guided the process, teaching younger members proper techniques to avoid waste and maximize caloric gain. These practices reinforced social cohesion and ensured the continuity of crucial survival skills. Uncertainty was ever present. Prey could escape, storms could disrupt plans, or dangerous terrain could impede the hunt. Hunters needed to make quick decisions, adapt strategies, and sometimes abandon prey for safety. Observation, foresight, and flexibility were as essential as physical skill or tool effectiveness in determining success. The story of Ice Age hunting highlights that survival was a complex interplay of skill, observation, social coordination, and adaptability. Every successful hunt relied on accumulated knowledge, practice, and cooperation, while failures served as lessons for future generations. And a lingering thought remains: how many early humans' lives, and ultimately the development of human social structures, were shaped by the successes and failures of these meticulously coordinated hunts in a frozen and unforgiving landscape. The culmination of Ice Age hunting strategies illustrates the intricate balance of knowledge, skill, and social cooperation that early humans relied upon for survival. Success in hunting was never guaranteed. Each expedition carried risk, requiring planning, vigilance, and a keen understanding of both prey and environment. Yet, it was through these calculated efforts that humans secured their sustenance and ensured the survival of their communities. Large game hunts demanded collective intelligence. Herding animals toward cliffs, traps, or ambush points required precise coordination. Timing was critical. A misjudged movement or poorly placed hunter could allow the prey to escape, wasting precious time and energy. These hunts were not only physical endeavors, but cognitive exercises requiring observation, prediction, and strategic planning. Experience was indispensable, and elders often guided the most critical decisions, ensuring that accumulated knowledge shaped every hunt. Tools played an essential role in maximizing efficiency and safety. Spears, atlals, and later bows allowed hunters to strike from a distance, reducing the risk of injury from powerful animals. Stone points and carefully crafted wooden shafts reflected the ingenuity of early humans, who experimented with designs, materials, and techniques to improve success rates. Every spear, arrow, or trap represented a fusion of practical skill, environmental knowledge, and the cumulative wisdom of generations. Small game hunting and alternative food sources continued to supplement the diet. Fishing, trapping, and bird hunting provided consistent nutrition, especially during seasons when large prey was scarce. These activities required adaptability, observation, and tool making, demonstrating that survival relied on diverse skills rather than a singular approach. The ability to switch strategies and exploit a variety of resources was a hallmark of Ice Age ingenuity. The social dimension of hunting extended beyond the capture itself. Once a hunt succeeded, meat had to be butchered, preserved, and distributed efficiently. Communities worked collectively, sharing responsibilities according to skill and age. Knowledge of safe butchering techniques, methods to prevent spoilage, and strategies for portioning meat was transmitted through hands-on teaching and observation. This social learning reinforced group cohesion, trust, and the intergenerational transfer of survival expertise. Even with careful planning, hunting remained unpredictable. Prey could escape, weather could disrupt strategies, or injuries could compromise participants. Early humans had to adapt, adjust, and sometimes accept failure. These experiences taught resilience and informed future decisions, shaping a culture of observation, problem-solving, and collaboration that would endure for millennia. The culmination of hunting strategies highlights a broader lesson about human ingenuity. Survival was rarely a matter of luck or individual heroics. It was the product of careful planning, repeated practice, and cooperative effort. Each successful hunt strengthened the community, ensured nutritional security, and reinforced the social and cognitive skills necessary for long-term survival. And finally, a lingering reflection: how many early humans' lives and the development of complex social behaviors were shaped by the subtle interplay of risk, observation, and cooperation in hunting. The frozen landscapes of the Ice Age were unforgiving, yet through careful strategy, shared knowledge, and persistent innovation, humans not only survived, but laid the foundations for the social and technological evolution that continues to influence us today.